Warrior Lore. Chapter 3569. Same to you. The golden-armored Confucian nodded slightly and narrowed his eyes. He looked at the nascent soul on the round plate that had its eyelids closed and was motionless. He said, "This is already the third one. Brother Wong is indeed my unparalleled strategist. I have destroyed 2 Taoist countries and spent a lot of effort to search for Taoist nascent soul stage cultivators in the hidden immortal continent. In 2 years, I only captured 14 nascent soul stage cultivators, which is far from the number of immortal emissaries. I didn't expect to capture 3 nascent soul stage cultivators in a dozen days at the Jade Pavilion. Haha, this is all thanks to Brother Wong's good fortune." The Confucian scholar waved his hand and laughed. "If Brother Wong hadn't been conferred the title of Marquis, how could I have learned about the Jade Pavilion meeting from that Taoist cultivator? Moreover, it is said that in this Jade Pavilion meeting, most of the Taoist cultivators are so-called gold core cultivators. There aren't many nascent soul cultivators who can participate. Isn't it a sign of Brother Wong's great fortune? As long as Brother Wong completes the mission of the Immortal Envoys, you will certainly be favored by the Immortal Palace. Not to mention establishing an empire that will last for eternity, you can even expect to be ranked among the immortals. Don't worry. You and I have been side by side since we were children. With me, there will be no shortage of Brother Wong." The golden-armored Confucian laughed. "After I obliterate this nascent soul, we will look for the 4th nascent soul." With that, a dragon pattern appeared between the golden-armored Confucian's eyebrows. He bit his middle finger, and a drop of blood oozed out. He touched the dragon pattern with his hand, and a wisp of blood-red dragon chi rushed into the air. The Confucian scholar's index finger moved in the air, and the dragon chi followed the movement of his index finger. Inscriptions that resembled the roaring of small dragons appeared above the nascent souls. However, before these inscriptions were finished, the Confucian scholar frowned and his eyes flashed with 5-colored brilliance. He turned his head and reminded Brother Wong, "I'm afraid there isn't enough time. It seems that there are Taoist cultivators coming from that side?" "Oh?" Delight appeared on the golden-armored Confucian general's face. He opened his mouth, and the inscriptions that had already been written, as well as the remaining dragon chi, were immediately sucked into his mouth. He raised his hand, and the clouds above the round plate surged, suppressing Xian Songzi's nascent soul into the imperial artifact. He raised his eyebrows and smiled. "These Taoist cultivators are like carps crossing the river, all for the sake of the imperial master's lot. Even outsiders can't escape the temptation of fame and fortune. Brother Wong, please conceal yourself. I'll go and take a look." The Confucian scholar's eyes were abnormally bright. "Wait for my signal. Brother Wong, we'll attack together." Thousands of air currents surged around the golden-armored Confucian as he rushed into the sky. The disk also flew up, and the clouds turned into layers of white clouds, which were the same as the ones in the sky, covering the golden-armored Confucian for hundreds of feet around him. The Confucian scholar waved the 5-colored sword in his hand, and the sword turned into a rainbow. The Confucian scholar's figure also fell into it, and he became one with the sword as he rushed into the distance. In less than half a meal's worth of time, in the distant horizon, flames flashed into the sky, followed by a burst of music. More than a dozen boys with music in their hands stood on 3 or 5 huge fire vultures and flew over. The fire vultures were several feet in size, and as they flapped their fiery red wings, wisps of flames rushed into the air. Caw. Occasionally, the fire vultures would open their mouths and let out a clear cry, and several fierce flames would spurt out from their mouths and noses. The boys all wore fiery red Taoist robes, and the cuffs of their Taoist robes were decorated with flame patterns. Behind the fire vulture were several flaming carpets. On each of the carpets stood a cultivator in the same Taoist robes. These cultivators were slightly older, and each of them stood with a focused expression. Their eyes shone brightly, and each of them carried a large gourd on their backs. Behind the cultivators was a fiery red war chariot pulled by a fire dragon. Needless to say, the fire dragon was only dozens of feet long, and its body was surrounded by flames. Wisps of flames seemed to dance rhythmically in the air. Just the fiery red war chariot alone exuded a majestic aura. Anyone who looked at the war chariot would be filled with a kind of blazing heat. This kind of unforgettable aura caused the floating clouds in the air to ripple in all directions. Not to mention, the flames on the war chariot were red and black, and the black flames even distorted the void as the war chariot passed by. Looking at the war chariot, a cultivator who looked like a child sat calmly on it. His Taoist robes flashed with golden light, and a pitch-black flame pattern flickered between his eyebrows. This cultivator looked extremely inconspicuous on the war chariot, but the flames and the terrifying aura of the war chariot seemed to move with the cultivator's breathing. Oh! Suddenly, this cultivator's mouth and nose let out a low hum. The entire war chariot's flames greatly flourished, and that majestic aura even rushed into the air. Stop! A middle-aged man closest to this cultivator hastily spoke. Immediately, the music-playing boy stopped. Ancestor! That middle-aged man hastily turned his head and asked in a low voice, "Do you have any orders?" That child did not pay attention to this middle-aged man. His eyes slightly opened, and two faint flames flashed from his pitch-black pupils. The child raised his head and swept a glance, indifferently saying, "Your distinguished self has dragon chi. I fear you are the master of a country. Hiding here today, are you looking for a suitable national teacher?" It was a pity that after a long while, no one spoke. That child was not angry, and he still said with an indifferent tone, "This old man is the Leaf Fire Nation's Taoist Master Huada. I received Star Lord Hall's Kong Hongwu's invitation to go to the Jade Pavilion. If your distinguished self has the heart to find a talent that can assist your distinguished self in stabilizing the country, you can wait until after the Jade Pavilion's meeting to pay a visit to each Star General." However, speaking to here, Taoist Huada's voice suddenly became cold. "However, this old man sees that your Confucian cultivation has already reached the upper fourth level of origin energy. You can use a dragon weapon to fight against someone with the fifth level of origin energy. I fear you don't need my Tao sect's national teacher, right? Let this old man give you a piece of advice. Don't have any dirty thoughts in your heart. My Tao sect's cultivators are all celestial monarchs in the eyes of the immortal palaces. They are not people that an emperor of a continent like you can understand. As a Tao sect's cultivator, although I can't rashly kill you, if you don't listen to this old man and insist on doing things your own way, sooner or later, you will fall at the hands of my Tao sect's disciples." After a while, Taoist Huada waved his hand and ordered, "Let's go, go." When the middle-aged cultivator heard this, he hastily waved his hand. The dozens of children in front of him began to play again. The fire dragon roared, and the war chariot began to move again. Behind the war chariot, there were dozens of young and beautiful women dressed in palace attire. They held various magic tools in their hands, and their jade pendants and other items were jingling. Just as Taoist Huada's war chariot flew over 100 meters, a huge dragon-like flame suddenly appeared in the sky and pounced toward a large cloud. Boom! With a loud bang, the clouds did not dissipate like ordinary clouds. Instead, they flashed with golden light. Although the golden light quickly melted into liquid gold in the flames, the clouds did not dissipate. After the time it took to eat a meal, Taoist Huada's trump card disappeared, and the fire dragon also gradually disappeared. The cloud violently tumbled, and the golden-armored Confucian stepped out of the cloud with an angry expression. At this moment, the disc in his hand was still covered in a layer of faint flame. "Brother Wang." In the distance, a five-colored rainbow appeared out of thin air, and the Confucian scholar appeared again. There was a kind of fear on his face, and he whispered, "I was also warned by Taoist Huada, and didn't dare to rashly send out a message. It's only an upper fourth grade essence force." The golden-armored Confucian narrowed his eyes, and the dragon chi between his eyebrows faintly roared. "If I go all out with Brother Wang's help, I have a 60% chance of killing him." The Confucian scholar frowned and shook his head slightly. "Brother Wang, you underestimate this cultivator too much. He can easily detect our concealment technique, which shows that Tao sect's divine sense is powerful. Any cultivator with outstanding divine sense generally has a secret technique that others can't reach. We can't let the so-called Star Lord Hall know that we are here to kill nascent soul cultivators. Moreover, Taoist Huada is invited to the Jade Pavilion meeting. The dragon-shaped cloud under his feet flashed with golden light, and he also chased after him like a meteor. In just over an hour, the two had already flown more than thousands of miles. Seeing the mountains spread out under them and the sunlight shining down from above, the golden-armored Confucian general pointed with his finger and said with a smile, "If I were born with a cliff, I would expand the territory of the empire to this place. I am willing to rule the hidden immortal forever, and the people of the hidden immortal are all my children." -12. However, in Xiao Hua's eyes, after seeing the 5 brocade cloud paintings aura that could exterminate all living things, this kind of aura was somewhat insufficient. Seeing that the pillar of Zhanqi mercilessly descending and really wanting to kill him as soon as they met, Xiao Hua's previous thoughts of asking for the reason had already been strangled by Xiao Hua. "Humph." Xiao Hua sneered, and the space several dozen feet around him suddenly became cold. He then clapped his hands, and golden light surged out from the top of his head. A nascent soul hand that was several hundred feet in size soared into the sky and grabbed towards the circular plate. Once the nascent soul hand appeared, the space within 1,000 feet seemed to solidify, and even the pillar of Zhanqi was controlled. At this moment, the Confucian scholar cried out in alarm. The Confucian general named Yin Ming was greatly shocked, but this shock only lasted for a moment. Soon after, the Confucian general laughed loudly. "Xin Yinliang, come over here. This is another nascent soul cultivator, and his cultivation is close to the upper 4th level of origin energy. Capture him." Unfortunately, before he could finish his words, his expression changed drastically again. Because Xiao Hua's nascent soul hand was coming from afar, a suffocating feeling was born in his heart. The Zhanqi in his body, like the Zhanqi in the air, was in a state of stagnation. "Damn it!" the Confucian general cursed. He opened his mouth and a blood-red Zhanqi fell on the circular plate. A bloody mist appeared on the circular plate, and the entire circular plate suddenly expanded. Within the bloody mist, countless images of mountains and rivers appeared. The Zhanqi had a dignified aura. It was several times heavier than before, and in an instant, the nascent soul hand became dim. "It's just a small trick." Xiao Hua sneered, and his divine sense suddenly activated. During this time, Xiao Hua's divine sense had been tempered by Do Shan Jun's divine sense secret technique, and had become a lot stronger. With this activation, the magic power in his body was truly matched with the secret technique, and majestically rushed into the nascent soul hand. Xiao Hua's divine sense moved at will, and the nascent soul hand emitted a bright golden light. It crossed the sky and grabbed the entire circular plate along with the pillar of Zhanqi. Rumble. A series of rumbling sounds came from the nascent soul hand. The entire nascent soul hand continuously shook, but there was no sign of it collapsing. Suppress. 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 The Confucian scholar's face was somewhat pale. He hurriedly bit his finger and pressed it on the dragon mark between his eyebrows, and shouted 3 times in a row. Roar. From the dragon mark, a blood-red crystal thread rushed out. This crystal thread was in the shape of a dragon and elephant. It landed on the circular plate, and the entire circular plate instantly turned into an oval-shaped jade seal. A terrifying Zhanqi that could make immortals and mortals retreat rushed out from the jade seal, and in an instant, Xiao Hua's nascent soul hand was pushed away. Boring. Xiao Hua's reaction was definitely unforgettable for the Confucian scholar named Xian Yinming. Xiao Hua helplessly shook his head and berated his unique imperial dragon technique. Boring. Xian Yinming sneered. How could a Taoist cultivator know the power of a Confucian cultivator's Zhanqi? Unfortunately, just as these sarcastic words came out from the bottom of his heart, he saw Xiao Hua's Zhanqi flourish. Roar. A Zhanqi that was countless times stronger than the mountain and river seal rushed out. This Zhanqi unexpectedly turned into the shadow of a huge dragon. It opened its mouth in the air, and the mountain and river seal fell into the huge dragon's mouth like a small stone. Not only that, After the mountain and river seal fell into the huge dragon's mouth, a powerful suction force soared into the sky like maggots. It really fell on the dragon mark between Xian Yiming's eyebrows. Before Xian Yiming could do anything, his body became light, as if a cold wind blew through his heart. The dragon mark between his eyebrows turned into a golden python and fell into the huge dragon's mouth. Xian Yiming was stunned. Although this was the first time he encountered it, and he had never heard of it before, he clearly knew in his heart that the Zhen Qi in his body, which was the fate of the capital Qin state, had been robbed. It was taken away by this unremarkable Taoist cultivator in front of him. How is this possible? Xian Yiming almost roared in his heart, but the development of the situation had long been out of his control. In the moment when he was absent-minded, he saw Xiao Hua open his hand, and a golden light flashed in the air. Although Xian Yiming's golden armor flashed with countless inscriptions, layers of Zhen Qi were generated from the void. Layer by layer, and layer by layer, they condensed, wanting to block the sword light. However, under the swing of the golden dragon's tail, all the inscriptions were cut in half, and all the Zhen Qi was cut off from Xian Yiming's neck as easily as tofu. Xian Yiming's eyes were rounder than usual. Perhaps only at this time did he remember what Huada Zhenren said before. Pooh! Xian Yiming's neck spurted out several feet of blood, and the same green Zhen Qi rushed out from the blood, with a panicked face, and fell towards the five-colored rainbow in the distance. Humph! Xiao Hua coldly snorted, and the Tang Jiao shears slightly trembled. A golden light streaked across the sky, and the whole Zhen Qi was cut in half. As the Tang Jiao shears' golden light shone brightly, the Zhen Qi was also absorbed by the Tang Jiao shears. Go! Xiao Hua pointed his finger again, and the Tang Jiao shears did not stop in the air, and cut towards the approaching five-colored rainbow. Xian Yiliang's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. In the blink of an eye, in the time it took for him to urge his Zhen Qi to catch up, Brother Wang, who was at the upper fourth level of Zhen Qi, had already fallen. Not to mention that the capital Qin state's national weapon had fallen into the hands of this Taoist sect cultivator. Even the Emperor's imperial dragon technique was a piece of cake in front of this Taoist sect cultivator's Zhen Qi. In particular, the golden light that pierced through the sky flashed with a cold light and sharpness that was not the slightest bit inferior to the Zhen Qi sword in his hand. Although Xian Yiliang's heart was filled with hatred, he did not lose his reason. The moment he urged his Zhen Qi to cut towards the Tang Jiao shears, his entire body flashed, and he prepared to escape in another direction. Ka! With a crisp sound, the five-colored rainbow shook violently, and several cracks appeared. Xian Yiliang's face immediately paled. Xian Yinliang did not dare to hesitate any longer, and the Zhen Qi in his body gushed out like it was free. He hurriedly rushed into the distance, and he did not even have the courage to look back. He was afraid that if he looked back, his speed of escape would decrease, and that golden light would fall on his body. The escape of a cultivator at the upper fourth level of Zhen Qi was comparable to the strength of a late Yuanying stage cultivator. Although Xian Yiliang's escape was not comparable to the teleportation of a Yuanying stage cultivator, the difference was not too great. If it was someone else, they might not be able to catch up. Unfortunately, this kind of speed paled in comparison to Xiao Hua's lightning escape. However, although Xiao Hua liked to eliminate evil, he was merciful towards enemies who did not act ruthlessly against him. Looking at the five-colored Zhen Qi from afar, Xiao Hua waved his hand, and the Tang Jiao shears fell into his hand. There was not the slightest bit of damage on the sharp blade. Damn it, I really didn't expect this. This Do Shan Jun's divine sense technique is really powerful. Xiao Hua sighed with emotion. Not to mention this Xiao's Yuanying stagehand is extremely powerful. The speed and power of this Tang Jiao shears have also increased by a lot. With this kind of divine sense, this Xiao can easily use all of the Yuanying stage techniques. -12. He grabbed with his hand, and the cloud that soared into the sky fell into Jade Archive, Xiao Hua's hand, and turned into a thin layer of almost invisible cloud. The strangest thing was that the cloud was extremely repulsive to Jade Archive Xiao Hua. The edges of the cloud were like tentacles, trying to avoid Jade Archive Xiao Hua's aura. Moreover, The uncontrollable aura from before was brewing inside the cloud, as if it would explode as long as it found an opportunity. Dragon Vein Xiaohua smiled and said, "This must be something for Confucian cultivators. As for what it is specifically used for, I don't know." "Where is Confucian cultivator Xiaohua?" Jade Archive Xiaohua asked. Shua. The five-colored cloud moved, and the scholarly dressed Confucian cultivator Xiaohua appeared in front of Jade Archive Xiaohua. He cupped his hands and said, "What business does fellow immortal have with me?" At this time, Jade Archive Xiaohua was used to Confucian cultivator Xiaohua's name. He stretched out his hand and asked, "Does fellow immortal recognize this thing?" "I don't recognize it," Confucian cultivator Xiaohua answered very cleanly. After answering, he didn't forget to add, "Fellow immortal recognizes it. I recognize it. If fellow immortal doesn't recognize it, I also don't recognize it." Jade Archive Xiaohua rolled his eyes at Confucian cultivator Xiaohua and said in a strange tone, "Fellow immortal has only studied for a few years. Why do your words sound so sour?" What made Jade Archive Xiaohua's eyes pop out was that Confucian cultivator Xiaohua actually shook his head and said, "If you know it, then you know it. If you don't know it, then you don't know it. Haha, I still have clothes to dry at home. I'll take my leave first." Dragon Vein Xiaohua laughed and disappeared with a flash of golden light. The mountain river seal, however, remained in place. "Fellow immortal, help I take a look at what this thing is." Jade Archive Xiaohua waved his hand and threw the cloud into Confucian cultivator Xiaohua's hand without waiting for him to drop his book bag. Scholarly cultivator Xiaohua took the strands of cloud, but before he could do anything, a loud boom resounded. The strands of cloud began to expand as if they were filled with air. Soon after, strings of jade flew out from the expanding cloud along with heavenly music. Then, layers upon layers of palaces appeared from the cloud. Xiaohua glanced at the Jade Archive and saw that there was an immortal jade palace hidden inside the cloud. Immortal palace? Jade Archive Xiaohua frowned because he was very familiar with the image of the immortal palace inside the cloud. It was the immortal palace that Chongyun sect's Emo Jianli and the others showed on the stage during the longevity-suppressing immortals ceremony. This is the immortal palace decree. Jade Archive Xiaohua didn't hear anything, but Confucian cultivator Xiaohua's eyes flashed with 5 colors, as if there was something Confucian cultivators could see inside the cloud. Confucian cultivator Xiaohua said indifferently, "It's for the king of Qin State, Xian Yinming, but there's nothing written inside. I don't know what use it has." Jade Archive Xiaohua frowned even more. Looking at the immortal palace decree in Confucian cultivator Xiaohua's hand, he asked curiously, "Why did the immortal palace give the immortal palace decree to the king of hidden immortal continent? Moreover, according to common sense, any decree should be written on the immortal palace decree, right?" "That's true, but maybe the immortal palace has some secret that they don't want others to know, so they didn't write anything." Confucian cultivator Xiaohua nodded. "Unfortunately, Xian Yiming's corpse is long gone, and I'm afraid his soul is also gone. Otherwise, fellow immortal could ask." "Forget it, who cares? Confucian cultivator Xiaohua's matter has nothing to do with I." Jade Archive Xiaohua waved his hand and asked, "Is it better to leave this immortal palace decree with fellow immortal, or in the mountain river seal?" "Naturally, it's better to leave it with me. This immortal palace decree is the same as Mahavairokkana's Buddhist edict. The essence of Confucian cultivator Xiaohua's cultivation can be traced. It's very useful for my cultivation. Leaving it with fellow immortal Dragon Vein is like casting pearls before swine." Confucian cultivator Xiaohua smiled, and his eyes curved. Only now could it be seen that this Confucian cultivator Xiaohua was definitely Xiaohua's primordial spirit. Even if he read Confucian cultivator Xiaohua's poems and books, he still couldn't change his greedy nature. After Confucian cultivator Xiaohua finished speaking, he opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of true qi. The entire immortal palace decree turned into a pure white feather robe that fell on Confucian cultivator Xiaohua's body. Waves of clouds appeared out of thin air, and Confucian cultivator Xiaohua really looked like an immortal. "Goodbye." Confucian cultivator Xiaohua was very polite. He cupped his hands and said, "In the future, if there is such a good thing, don't hesitate to call me over." I'm willing to serve fellow immortal. I won't see you off. Jade Archive Xiao Hua's eyes seemed to have seen Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua's foxtail. He waved his hand, and his gaze fell on the three nascent souls. After thinking for a moment, Xiao Hua made a grabbing motion with his hand, and the three nascent souls fell into his hand. Then, his entire figure disappeared. In a flash, Jade Archive Xiao Hua's figure appeared in the space. However, before he could stand still, he saw layers of bubbles appear on the skin of the three nascent souls in his hand. The bubbles rapidly expanded and kept bursting. The skin of the three nascent souls collapsed in the space. Oh, not good. Jade Archive Xiao Hua was shocked. He didn't dare to be negligent. He covered his robe and his figure swayed. He quickly rushed out of the space with the three nascent souls. When the three nascent souls came out of the space, the bubbles on the skin immediately disappeared. The previous collapse also disappeared. This, Jade Archive Xiao Hua pondered for a moment and immediately understood. Damn it, I understand. The nascent souls of Taoist cultivators are the condensation of the world's spiritual energy. In the end, it is the Tao Foundation and the world's spiritual energy. In I-Space, the world's spiritual energy is different from the outside world. The primordial spirit and the physical body can enter, but the nascent souls can't. Good. Fortunately, I's nascent soul has just been born and hasn't entered the space. Otherwise, it would be a big loss. What does fellow Taoists think? Jade Archive Xiao Hua suddenly thought of something and asked. Green-robed Xiao Hua's figure appeared next to Jade Archive Xiao Hua. He looked at the three nascent souls with some disdain and shook his head slightly. Fellow Taoist, although these two nascent souls are in the middle stage of the nascent soul stage, it seems that the difference between them and my nascent souls is not small. You have a good idea. Everyone can use the body of this nascent soul, but I don't think it's good. Others may not like it. Wait for I to see. Jade Archive Xiao Hua raised his head and thought for a moment. He stretched out his hand, and a thin crystal thread appeared between his index finger. It split into three and fell between the eyebrows of the three nascent souls. A moment later, Jade Archive Xiao Hua shook his hand, and the crystal thread disappeared. He said, as I thought, the primordial spirits of these two nascent souls have already been obliterated. They are just empty shells. If fellow Taoists are interested, you can all enter. As he said this, he looked at green-robed Xiao Hua with a smile and said, could it be that fellow Taoist is not interested? Am I? How could I not be interested? Green-robed Xiao Hua replied in an embarrassed tone. When green-robed Xiao Hua entered one of the nascent souls, the nascent soul opened its eyes. It was very lively, and the nascent soul's body expanded a bit. However, the nascent soul waved its hands and looked at itself. It then lowered its head and closed its eyes. -12. Chapter 3572. Xian Songzi bitterly smiled and landed on the flying carriage. He sat down cross-legged and asked in a low voice, I wonder where Taoist Xiao is going? And where did you meet the king of the Qin state, Xian Yinming? When Xiao Hua said that he came to participate in the Jade Pavilion meeting and met Xian Yinming, Xian Songzi sighed and said with emotion, alas, it's all because of fate. If I met you half a day earlier, I'm afraid I wouldn't have encountered such a disaster. Oh? What do you mean? Xiao Hua understood. You're also going to the Jade Pavilion meeting? You just met Xian Yinming half a day ago? Of course. Xian Songzi nodded. Moreover, if I guessed correctly, Xian Yinming and another Confucian cultivator were lying in ambush on the way to the Jade Pavilion meeting. Damn it. Xiao Hua's eyes flashed with ruthlessness. He knew that the other two nascent soul cultivators must have the same goal as him. But then, Xiao Hua was puzzled again. He looked at Xian Songzi and said in a low voice, but the problem is, Xian Yinming is a Confucian cultivator. Why does he want the nascent soul of a Taoist cultivator? This is not something I can know. Xian Songzi clenched his teeth and said, doesn't Xian Yinming have an accomplice? He must also be from the capital Qin state. When we find that person, we'll know. Yes, there will be a chance in the future. Xiao Hua nodded and looked around. But right now, it's better for me to participate in the Jade Pavilion meeting. Oh, Taoist Xiao, this is... Xian Songzi looked at Xiao Hua in confusion. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. I'm lost. I can't find where the Jade Pavilion is. Haha. Xian Songzi laughed. This was the first time he saw a Taoist cultivator who was lost, not to mention a nascent soul cultivator. Taoist Xiao, please land the flying carriage. Let I see where this is. Xian Songzi was now a nascent soul cultivator, so he could only use his nascent soul to explore. After Xiao Hua landed the flying carriage, Xian Songzi looked to the left and pointed. Taoist Xiao, you went the wrong way. You should fly in that direction. Thank you, fellow Taoist Xian Song. Xiao Hua also smiled and urged the Pegasus to fly towards the Jade Pavilion once again. After flying for a while, the atmosphere in the flying carriage became a little awkward. Xiao Hua looked at Xian Songzi, who didn't close his eyes to meditate, but had a flicker in his eyes as he looked at him from time to time. He asked, Taoist Xian Song, since things have come to this, it's useless to think too much about it. I'd better look forward. After all, it's better to have a nascent soul than to have a nascent soul obliterated. Yes, I understand, Xian Songzi hurriedly said, but with my current situation, I really can't do anything about it. That's right. What do you plan to do in the future? Xiao Hua couldn't help but feel pity in his heart. He knew that this question of his definitely had a cause and effect, but in the end, he still spoke. When Xian Songzi heard this, he hastily stood up and looked at Xiao Hua. He clenched his teeth and was about to kneel down. Unfortunately, Xiao Hua had already waved his hand and stopped him from kneeling down. He smiled and said, Fellow Taoist Xian Song, if there's anything you want to say, feel free to say it to me. If I can help, I'll help. Xian Songzi's face was slightly red and he said bitterly, to be able to meet Taoist Master Xiao is I's fortune. Not only did Taoist Master save I, you also didn't have any thoughts of enslaving I. This is really the luck that I cultivated in my previous lives. Now that I've met Taoist Master Xiao, then in the future, I can't help but rely on Taoist Master. In my opinion, I don't have anything to make a deal with Taoist Master. I'm willing to swear a blood oath and serve Taoist Master for 1,000 years as the price for my survival. Of course, I also hope that fellow Taoist can do a few things for I in consideration of being a slave to I. Swear a hard oath? Serve for 1,000 years? Xiao Hua blinked his eyes and looked at the 1-foot-long nascent soul. If it was a nascent soul without a nascent soul, Xiao Hua wouldn't mind. But what's there to command about a nascent soul with a nascent soul? Moreover, if he really agreed, from Xian Songzi's words, what would he have to do for him? Forget it. Forget it. Xiao Hua didn't like trouble and hurriedly waved his hand. Fellow Taoist is still a nascent soul cultivator. How can you lower yourself? Moreover, I don't like to order others around, so there's no need to mention this. But, Xian Songzi was a bit tongue-tied. Oh, if you're afraid of being ordered around by others, then in order to survive, you can stay by this Xiao's side. It doesn't matter. Xiao Hua hurriedly said, when you feel that you can leave, just tell this Xiao. Taoist Master Xiao. Xian Songzi was almost about to cry. He had cultivated for 1,000 years and had never seen such a righteous Taoist cultivator. Is this still a Taoist cultivator? This wasn't much. When Xiao Hua said the second sentence, Xian Songzi really felt that happiness had come too quickly. Oh, if you have anything you want me to do, I can also say it. Of course, it can't be too difficult. Otherwise, I can't do it. Xiao Hua said with a smile, as if he was sure that he could help Xian Songzi. Really? Xian Songzi was shocked by happiness to the point that his brain couldn't function properly. After a while, he said, Taoist Master doesn't want any price? What price? Xiao Hua waved his hand and said, what fellow Taoist wants me to do is naturally how to cultivate my nascent soul. This kind of thing, it's naturally useful to I, right? I can also do it in advance, just in case. Yes. Xian Songzi hurriedly nodded. Naturally, Taoist Master Xiao doesn't need to personally take revenge. What I want fellow Taoists to do is, of course, to protect my nascent soul cultivation and consider how to cultivate a scattered soul. Scattered soul? Xiao Hua blinked his eyes. He really hadn't heard of scattered soul. Fellow Taoist, have you heard of scattered immortals? Xian Songzi wasn't surprised and said, "Scattered soul is somewhat similar to scattered immortals. Never heard of it." Xiaohua's answer really surprised Xian Songzi. Cough, cough. Xian Songzi coughed twice and said with a smile, "Taoist Master Zhao's cultivation is profound and your future is immeasurable. Naturally, you don't need to know about such trivial things. I've only heard of scattered cultivators. Tell me, what are scattered immortals and scattered souls?" Xiaohua looked around and said, "Right now, we're still far away from the Jade Pavilion gathering. Let's talk for now." Okay. Xian Songzi didn't have any power to refuse Xiaohua and slowly said. Following Xian Songzi's explanation, Xiaohua gradually understood that the so-called scattered immortals were immortals in the immortal world who hadn't been granted an official position. At that time, the immortal world seemed to have some connection with the cultivation world. From time to time, there would be news from the immortal world. Moreover, there were many cases of people ascending to the immortal world. Loose immortals and righteous immortals had completely different influences in the cultivation world. Later, the connection between the immortal world and the cultivation world was cut off, and there was no more news from the immortal world. In the eyes of cultivators, there was no difference between righteous immortals and scattered immortals. Immortals had the future of ascending to the Mahayana realm. Afterwards, scattered immortals had a new meaning. They were cultivators who had cultivated to the crossing tribulation stage, but hadn't passed the heavenly tribulation and lost their physical body in the heavenly tribulation. However, they were lucky enough to leave behind a nascent soul. If these cultivators had passed the heavenly tribulation, their physical body would disappear and they wouldn't be able to enter the heavenly realm. However, if they hadn't passed the heavenly tribulation, their nascent soul would be left behind. This kind of awkward situation was different from immortals, so they were called scattered immortals. A scattered immortal's nascent soul had a part of the heavenly tribulation's power, which formed the so-called immortal chi. However, it was also because there was no immortal chi in the cultivation world that it was difficult for scattered immortals to improve their cultivation. The most troublesome thing for scattered immortals was that the nascent soul had the power of the heavenly tribulation. Every once in a while, a heavenly tribulation would appear. The power of the heavenly tribulation would increase again and again until the immortal chi in the scattered immortal's body was completely purified. In fact, cultivators who had truly passed the heavenly tribulation could rely on their physical body to absorb immortal chi. When the immortal chi in their body was enough, they could ascend to the immortal world. However, scattered immortals didn't have physical bodies and could only use the heavenly tribulation to cultivate. They could gather the immortal chi in their body to reach the limit that the cultivation world couldn't accommodate. Of course, this process was extremely painful and dangerous. Each heavenly tribulation wasn't inferior to the initial heavenly tribulation. If a scattered immortal couldn't pass any of the heavenly tribulations, they would turn into ashes. Of course, this kind of hard work also had a huge harvest. After ordinary scattered immortals ascended to the immortal world, their strength would far surpass ordinary immortal world cultivators, and they would be valued in the immortal world. As for the scattered nascent soul that Xian Songzi wanted to cultivate, it was also compared to the normal cultivation method, and was even inferior to that of a scattered immortal. Scattered nascent soul was merely borrowing the cultivation method of a scattered immortal. After a cultivator lost their physical body, they relied on a unique cultivation method to cultivate using the nascent soul method and finally reached the heavenly tribulation stage. However, even if a scattered nascent soul cultivator transcended the heavenly tribulation, they could only be a scattered immortal. It was impossible to obtain enough immortal chi in one heavenly tribulation. In particular, scattered nascent souls didn't have physical bodies, and it was practically impossible for them to transcend the Dashang heavenly tribulation. The fate of a scattered immortal was miserable, but the fate of a scattered nascent soul was even more miserable. Alas, so that's how it is. After Xiao Hua finished listening, he sighed and said, "I thought that loose immortals meant freedom, leisure, and comfort. Who would have known that this loose immortal is similar to loose cultivators who belong to sects and clans? This loose immortal is filled with blood and tears. However, fellow Taoist Xian Songzi, actually, with your current realm, you should consider." Xiao Hua actually wanted to say possession, but if Xian Songzi possessed, then what about the person who was possessed? Xian Songzi also didn't avoid Xiao Hua and said with a bitter smile, "There's no need for Taoists to remind me. I naturally know that possession is the best path. However, the problem is that I's nascent soul has already been formed, and an ordinary body wouldn't be able to withstand it. How can a body that can accommodate I's nascent soul be something that I can possess in my current state? Currently, it's already not bad that I can survive. How could I dare to think about anything else? Besides, even if I want to possess, I still have to rely on Taoist Xiao. With Taoist Zhao's character." "AI, that's right." Xiao Hua nodded. "I definitely won't allow you to casually harm other people." Chapter 3573. Green-robed Xiao Hua came out of his nascent soul and waved his hands, shouting, "Not good, not good. It's like wearing a pair of small shoes, but also like wearing a very sullen Taoist robe. I can't move at all. If the shoes are small, you can make them bigger. If the Taoist robe is small, you can also modify it." Jade Archive Xiao Hua advised earnestly, "We're poor, so just put up with it." "Put up with what?" Green-robed Xiao Hua rolled his eyes at Jade Archive Xiao Hua. He pointed at the two nascent soul cultivators and said, "These useless things can't be nourished by the 5 Qi righteous thunder. If they were to cultivate slowly, I'm afraid it would take thousands of years. Having is better than not having it." Jade Archive Xiao Hua naturally understood and said, "Also, if you can adapt to this thing, won't you be able to come out and help when I'm in danger? Don't let it be like the 5 brocade cloud painting battle last time. Obviously, everyone can help, but there's no way to go out." "Okay, okay." Green-robed Xiao Hua waved his hand. "Fellow Taoist, think of a way yourself. I know you've been thinking about that old bald donkey Gu Zhan's 200 years of cultivation. Fellow Taoist, don't forget, that's the cultivation path of a Buddhist sect's protector. There's no future." "Hee hee." Jade Archive Xiao Hua gave a rare embarrassed smile. "I was just thinking about it. Fellow Taoist, you don't have to take it out and embarrass yourself, right? A gentleman is magnanimous." Green-robed Xiao Hua's voice drifted, and his figure disappeared again. Jade Archive Xiao Hua immediately tested it. Sure enough, when the 5 Qi righteous thunder touched the nascent souls immediately showed signs of collapse. Helpless, Jade Archive Xiao Hua could only place the two nascent souls outside the 5 Qi righteous thunder and slowly nourish them with the true essence in his lower dantian. Xiao Hua took a look at the nascent soul that was flashing with 5 colored threads of qi. He then opened his mouth and a flying sword rushed out. In the blink of an eye, the nascent soul's 5 colored threads of qi were about to be cut in half. Xiao Hua then spat out another mouthful of qi. The nascent soul's body flashed with a faint golden light. The surrounding yuan qi began to gather toward the nascent soul, slowly repairing the previously collapsed skin of the nascent soul. Kill. After the time it took to finish a meal, Xian Songzi's weak, nascent soul finally opened its eyes. Without any hesitation, the moment it saw the person in front of it, Xian Songzi's nascent soul's eyes turned red. It rubbed its hands together, and the energy of heaven and earth surged. A powerful spell seal smashed towards the person's head. Xiao Hua had already anticipated this, so he wasn't angry. With a wave of his hand, under the heaven and earth in the sleeve, even Xian Songzi, who was a nascent soul cultivator, felt as if his entire body had sunk into something solid. It was difficult for him to move, let alone mobilize the qi of heaven and earth. Fellow Taoist, this is a dog biting an immortal. You don't know how to appreciate my kindness. Xiao Hua said with a smile, do you think I am the Confucian cultivator who killed your physical body and captured your nascent soul? You? You're a Taoist cultivator? At this moment, Xian Songzi was only a foot tall. He looked up and down at the giant like Xiao Hua. The hatred in his eyes was gone, but an indescribable fear was born. What caught Xiao Hua off guard was that Xian Songzi's hands once again formed a spell seal with great difficulty. Golden light splashed out from Xian Songzi's nascent soul. It was actually about to self-destruct. Damn it, you're sick. Xiao Hua was shocked. He angrily cursed and slapped his hand. The nascent soul's hand was displayed and firmly grasped Xian Songzi's nascent soul. The nearby chi of heaven and earth was blocked. Xiao Hua's entire body even soared into the sky. He flew straight into the astral winds before stopping. He looked at Xian Songzi in his hand with lingering fear. If something went wrong, he would immediately throw Xian Songzi into the astral winds. Do you want to die? Xiao Hua coldly said, if you want to die, you only need to nod your head. This Xiao will immediately throw you out. Don't even talk about using some self-destruct technique. As long as you enter the astral winds, your little body that just became a nascent soul will immediately turn into ashes. Although Xian Songzi was currently a nascent soul, he couldn't even sense a trace of chi of heaven and earth. Especially his own body, he couldn't move at all. He couldn't even answer Xiao Hua's question. Xiao Hua ignored him and continued to say, I know that your physical body was destroyed by the king of the capital Qin state. You have hatred in your heart, but your deep-rooted hatred should go to the king of the capital Qin state and take revenge on him. Oh, I forgot to tell you. The king of the capital Qin state has already been killed by this Xiao. If you want, you can go kill the other people of the capital Qin state. Of course, even if you kill a Confucian cultivator, this Xiao has no objections. What right do you have to self-destruct in front of your savior? Don't you know that if you self-destruct, this Xiao will also be implicated? If this Xiao knew, this Xiao would have just let that Xin Yinming obliterate your nascent soul. Seeing Xiao Hua ramble on for so long, the fear in Xian Songzi's nascent soul's eyes slightly disappeared and revealed a pleading expression. Xiao Hua didn't dare to easily relax his vigilance. His nascent soul's hand slightly relaxed as he asked, if you want to die, then nod your head. This Xiao will lend you a hand. If you don't want to die, then shake your head. Xian Songzi was somewhat silent as he stared at Xiao Hua. After half a cup of tea's time, he still didn't move. Forget it. Forget it. How could Xiao Hua really send Xian Songzi's nascent soul into the astral winds? Seeing that Xian Songzi didn't speak, he waved his hand and said, don't struggle. This Xiao was just joking with you because you really scared this Xiao. How about this? This Xiao will let you go. You can go wherever you want. Even if you want to self-destruct, you can. But wait until this Xiao leaves. Xian Songzi's nascent soul's eyes revealed a trace of disbelief, but soon after, he really believed it. Xiao Hua flew for a moment. Seeing that there was no one nearby, he reached out with his nascent soul's hand and threw Xian Songzi's nascent soul to the side. Then, he used the wind escape technique and ran far away. When he landed on the flying carriage, Xiao Hua was still muttering. However, when he really urged the heavenly horse, his heart calmed down and he suddenly realized why Xian Songzi was so scared. He then sighed and shook his head. Looking at the heavenly horse flapping its light feathers, his gaze was somewhat unfocused. Of course, it was only for a moment. Xiao Hua raised his voice again and said, Fellow Taoist, why are you following this Xiao for no reason? Whether you live or die has nothing to do with this Xiao. Can you just pretend that you never saw this Xiao? The fellow Taoist Xiao Hua spoke of was none other than Xian Songzi, who had used teleportation to land beside the flying carriage. In just a moment, Xian Songzi's nascent soul had already become somewhat dim. I wonder if fellow Taoist can let I in for a chat? Xian Songzi was somewhat helpless. He seemed to be pleading, but also seemed to be negotiating. Xiao Hua shook his head slightly and said, I'm very sorry. Fellow Taoist is really too dangerous. This Xiao still wants to live for a few more years. If fellow Taoist wants to thank me, then there's no need to say anything. You and I are both Taoist cultivators. To be able to meet you is fate between us. Moreover, this Xiao didn't intend to save you. However, that Xin Yinming also wanted to kill this Xiao, so this Xiao killed him. When I saw that you were captured, I just happened to save you. Fellow Taoist, Xian Songzi sighed and said, if I was captured by a Confucian cultivator or even killed, then all troubles would be over. However, if I was captured by a Taoist cultivator, then I wouldn't be able to reincarnate for 100 lifetimes. Fellow Taoist, don't say. You don't know about this and don't have such thoughts in your heart. TCH, Xiao Hua flicked his sleeve and said, who do you think this Xiao is? This Xiao naturally knows that capturing a nascent soul can be of great use. It can be used as the tool spirit of a spiritual treasure or eaten to increase one's cultivation. However, does this Shao need to use such methods? Moreover, if this Shao wants to use it, why would I need you? That king of the capital Qin state killed more than one nascent soul cultivator. However, you were lucky and your primordial spirit wasn't erased. Fellow Taoist may be straightforward and upright, but there are very few people like you in the Taoist sect. Xin Songzi bitterly smiled. He knew that what Xiao Hua said was correct. Otherwise, I would immediately be afraid when I saw that fellow Taoist was a Taoist cultivator. It's fine, it's fine. Xiao Hua waved his hand again. This Xiao didn't think about it before, but when I just returned, I already knew. This Xiao doesn't blame you anymore. You can go now. Thank you, fellow Taoist Xiao, for forgiving I. Xin Songzi's face revealed bitterness. He said again, however, this world is so big. Where can I find a place to stand? If fellow Taoist Xiao doesn't help me, I'm afraid that in less than an hour, I will turn into ashes. Seeing that Xin Songzi's nascent soul had dimmed a bit as he spoke, Xiao Hua sighed. He knew that Xin Songzi's nascent soul had just been born and couldn't withstand the impact of the energy of heaven and earth. It couldn't withstand the wind and rain of heaven and earth. If he really ignored Xin Songzi, 1,000 years of hard work would disappear in an instant. Come in. Xiao Hua was soft-hearted in the end. He waved his hand, and the restriction on the flying carriage dispersed. Xin Songzi revealed a happy expression and entered in a flash. After the restriction on the flying carriage was restored, Xiao Hua still didn't feel at ease. He flicked his finger again and several rays of light flashed around Xin Songzi's nascent soul. Xin Songzi immediately felt several warm currents surging around him. Xiao Hua clapped his hand and took out several pieces of top-grade nascent stones. He asked, "Do you still want more nascent stones?" "Thank you, fellow Taoist Xiao." Xin Songzi was overjoyed. He waved his hand and a black, earth-type top-grade nascent stone fell in front of him. As Xin Songzi hugged it with his two small hands, that nascent stone shrank visibly. When that nascent stone disappeared, Xiao Hua took out another earth-type nascent stone and asked, "Fellow Taoist, do you still want more?" "Ah, thank you, fellow Taoist Xiao." Xin Songzi smiled bitterly. "I only have so many nascent stones. If I use any more, I'll be full. After all, a nascent soul is still a nascent soul. Without a body tempering nascent stones, these nascent stones can only be a kind of supplement." Xiao Hua nodded and put away the nascent stones. Xin Songzi looked at the flying carriage and Pegasus and bowed. "Fellow Taoist Xiao, I'm Xin Songzi. May I know your Taoist name?" "Oh, so it's fellow Taoist Xin Songzi. I'm Xiao Hua. My Taoist name is Taoist Xiao." Xiao Hua didn't dare to be negligent and hurriedly returned the greeting. "So it's Taoist Xiao. I've been disrespectful," Xin Songzi said respectfully. "Previously, I was too impetuous. Now, I formally thank Taoist Xiao for saving my life." "Ah, no need to be polite." Xiao Hua waved his hand. "Actually, I didn't save your life." -12. Chapter 3574. Hearing Xiao Hua's words, Xin Songzi could only helplessly reply, "Therefore, this poor Taoist's current plan can only be to scatter my nascent soul, and when there's a chance in the future, I'll think about taking over the body. Since there is a path, there is an end. Fellow Taoist Xin Songzi, if you cultivate scattered nascent soul and scattered immortal, I will definitely support you no matter how difficult it is." Xiao Hua looked at Xin Songzi and said word by word, "But if you take over, I may not." Xiao Hua didn't say anything more. He believed that Xin Songzi would understand his meaning. Xin Songzi didn't know where Xiao Hua's confidence came from, but he was inexplicably moved. He cupped his hands and said, "I don't dare to have extravagant hopes for the future. I only want to get through the current difficulties first." "That's true. Take one step at a time. You don't have to worry too much about the future." Xiao Hua knew that Xin Songzi's mood wasn't good right now, so he didn't want to comfort him. He just casually said some words. Unexpectedly, Xin Songzi said seriously, "Taoist Master Xiao, you don't know. All of this is the will of the heavens. Will of the heavens? Xiao Hua was stunned. He was somewhat baffled. As early as 600 years ago. Xian Songzi's tone was somewhat aged, his gaze looking towards the clouds in front of the flying carriage as if he was reminiscing. I had just cultivated to gold core. In order to find a suitable cultivation method, I killed many Taoist cultivators. In the end, I finally obtained a cultivation method suitable for I from an unknown cultivator. And in this cultivator's small Chinkuan pouch, I also obtained an incomplete ink cloud pupil. What was recorded inside was the cultivation method for scattered immortals. There was also a so-called scattered nascent soul cultivation method. It must be the cultivation experience of some scattered immortal senior. Speaking up to here, Xian Songzi was silent for a moment, then continued. At that time, I felt that this secret technique was really inconceivable, and this thing was really boring, so I almost threw it away, but thinking that it was left behind by a scattered immortal senior, it could be considered precious, and I had never heard of scattered immortals before. I kept it. I didn't expect that the cause from 600 years ago would actually bear fruit today. No wonder you know about scattered immortals. Xiao Hua sighed again. Taoist has actually obtained this ink cloud pupil. When fellow Taoist brought it up today, this Xiao still feels that I'm ignorant and inexperienced. Bodiless immortals are called immortals, but they actually live miserable lives. They live in fear every day, afraid that the heavenly tribulation will descend. That's why they do everything they can to find a way to avoid the tribulation and a way to deal with it. There are very few of them in the first place, so how can they appear in front of people? Xian Songzi nodded. Even if I knew about this, I've never seen a bodiless immortal before, and I've never heard anyone mention it. Xiao Hua pinched his chin and said, That's right, according to what I know. As long as one can't pass the heavenly tribulation, no matter if it's the physical body or the nascent soul, both will turn into ashes. It's unlikely that the nascent soul will be tougher than the physical body and be able to escape the heavenly tribulation. There's always a way out. There's always an exception. Xian Songzi smiled. 10,000 years later, I'll show you this exception. Good, this Xiao will wait and see. Xiao Hua said with a smile. I wonder how this Xiao can help you now. Tell me about it. That Imo Yuntong is in Ai's Chinkuan back. If you killed that bastard Xian Yinming, Imo Yuntong must be in your hands. Xian Songzi smiled and said, Moreover, Ai's natal magic treasure, the Hanging Mountain Pagoda, should also be in your hands. Now that I can't stay outside for long, I can only rely on the Hanging Mountain Pagoda to survive. Oh, I understand. Xiao Hua waved his hand and took out Xin Yinming's Chinkuan back. He handed it to Xian Songzi and said, It should all be inside. Take it yourself. Taoist. Xian Songzi smiled bitterly. Now that I don't have the strength to truss a chicken, I have to rely on Taoist for everything. Even that nascent soul cultivation secret technique needs Taoist to pass on to me. Oh, this Xiao understands. Xiao Hua suddenly understood. He knew that when Xian Songzi lost his physical body, he couldn't cultivate any divine abilities. He really had to rely on Xiao Hua to pass on these secret techniques to him first. Therefore, Xiao Hua didn't hesitate. He first looked for Xian Songzi's magic treasure and gave it to Xian Songzi. Xian Songzi hugged the small pagoda with both hands, and his nascent soul flashed with light and faint magic power fluctuations. When the small pagoda also fluctuated, the small pagoda slowly shrank and fell into the nascent soul's hands. Only then did the vigilance on Xian Songzi's face, which had never disappeared, slightly relax. Then, Xiao Hua looked for Xian Songzi's shabby Imo Yuntong. Fortunately, although there were many things in Xian Yinming's Chinkuan pouch and Xian Songzi didn't care about the Imo Yuntong before, Xian Yinming had just obtained it from Xian Songzi. Xian Yinming didn't have time to deal with it, so Xiao Hua only spent a little effort to find it. After obtaining Xian Songzi's consent again, Xiao Hua placed the Imo Yuntong on his forehead and carefully looked at it. Then, he stretched out his hand and a faint crystal thread appeared on his index finger. He touched the forehead of Xian Songzi's nascent soul. Xian Songzi's nascent soul rapidly trembled, unable to withstand the power of Xiao Hua's touch. Xiao Hua was helpless. He could only pass on less than 30% of the Imo Yuntong's contents, which were suitable for Xian Songzi's current situation. Even so, Xian Songzi's expression became dispirited after reading this, and the luster of his nascent soul dimmed again. Fellow Taoist Xian Song, Xiao Hua frowned and said, "Now you need to cultivate." This Xiao has also seen the contents of the Mo Yuntong. This Xiao will do his best to find suitable spiritual herbs and spiritual items for you, so that you can continue to cultivate. However, the spiritual items you need are really rare. To tell you the truth, this Xiao has never heard of them before. This Xiao doesn't dare to guarantee. Taoist Xiao, thank you for your trouble. Xian Songzi was really out of breath. He said in a low voice, "Those things are called ancient things. Perhaps they have changed their names after being passed down. Unfortunately, there are no diagrams. I will leave everything to Taoist Xiao. Now, I will enter the suspended mountain pagoda to cultivate. If Taoist Xiao has any news or any errands, you can take out the suspended mountain pagoda." Yes, fellow Taoist Xian Song can rest assured. This Xiao's luck has always been very good. Perhaps I will be able to find the items that fellow Taoist needs very soon. Xiao Hua said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist can rest assured and cultivate in seclusion. Many thanks, at this time. No amount of gratitude was enough." Xian Songzi said a few words. His entire yuanying flashed with an earthen yellow brilliance, causing the suspended mountain pagoda to also shine brightly. Soon after, the yuanying slowly fell into the suspended mountain pagoda and disappeared. Xiao Hua looked at the suspended mountain pagoda in front of him that had lost its brilliance and fell onto the flying carriage. He secretly sighed. A yuanying cultivator who had cultivated for more than 1,000 years had fallen into such a state in just one day. It really made one's heart cold. Xiao Hua was worried about Xian Songzi's mood, so he didn't ask about Xian Songzi's origin. Because he was worried about the condition of Xian Songzi's yuanying, Xiao Hua didn't ask about the situation of the Jade Pavilion gathering. The suspended mountain pagoda couldn't be put into the space. Xiao Hua carefully put it into his chinkuan bag. Then, without caring about the Pegasus, he clapped his hand and took the Mo Yuntong in his hand. He placed it on his forehead and carefully examined it. In fact, as early as when Xian Songzi talked about the cultivation method of loose immortals, Xiao Hua's heart was moved. This cultivation method was very similar to his current yuanying cultivation method. Now, Xiao Hua's yuanying was growing vigorously under the bombardment of the 5 Qi righteous thunders. Wasn't it the same as a loose immortal increasing immortal spiritual force through the lightning tribulation? However, Xiao Hua's 5 Qi righteous thunders didn't release immortal spiritual force. Moreover, the 5 Qi righteous thunders were also under Xiao Hua's control, so they wouldn't be a threat to yuanying. In fact, Xiao Hua still didn't understand why the 5 Qi righteous thunders could promote the growth of yuanying. Could it be because the 5 Qi righteous thunders were an item of the immortal palace and contained immortal spiritual force? But no matter how he thought about it, there was a problem. The immortal palace wasn't the immortal world, and the immortal palace of a Confucian cultivator wasn't the immortal palace of a Taoist sect. Of course, since Xian Songzi's yuanying could cultivate a loose immortal soul, then the 2 yuanying without primordial spirits that Xiao Hua obtained could also cultivate a loose immortal soul under the support of the green-robed Xiao Hua and the other primordial spirits. This temptation made Xiao Hua's heart pound. However, after looking at it for a moment, several divine senses swept over the flying carriage, which attracted Xiao Hua's attention again. Xiao Hua thought for a moment, then threw Mo Yuntong to Dragon Vein Xiao Hua to take a look. He stood up, put his hands behind his back, and looked in the direction where the divine senses swept over. The direction where the divine senses swept over wasn't where the Jade Pavilion was, but where Xiao Hua was about 100 miles away. After Xiao Hua let the heavenly horse slow down its flying speed, in just the time it took to eat a meal, 3 cultivators wearing Taoist robes came over. The one in front was an old man with white hair and a beard. Below him was a pigeon-like bird, but this pigeon was about 2 zhang in size. The pigeon's face looked fierce, and when its wings flapped, it set off a powerful airflow. This old man had a red face, a pair of broom-like eyebrows, and leopard-shaped eyes. He looked majestic without being angry, which was quite a match for the bird below him. The 2 cultivators behind the old man were slightly younger, but their hair was also white, and their eyebrows were quite weathered. One of them was on a flying boat, and the other was on a flying sword. Although their faces were not very fierce, there was also a kind of powerful momentum in their eyes. It seemed that the three of them were not ordinary people. Fellow Taoists. Although the three of them had already scanned Xiaohua with their divine senses, now that they really saw Xiaohua, they saw that Xiaohua was so young, and they couldn't see Xiaohua's strength even when using spells. They couldn't help but look at each other. The person in front hurriedly stood up from the back of the pigeon, cupped his hands, and said, "I'm Changyu of Qingzhou Qingyan Ridge. I wonder if you are going to the Jade Pavilion meeting?" Xiaohua naturally returned the salute and said with a smile, "I'm Xiaohua of Black Cloud Ridge in Yuzhou, and I'm going to the Jade Pavilion meeting." Could it be that the three of you are also going to the Jade Pavilion meeting? Haha, yes, that's right. Hearing this, Changyu raised his thick eyebrows and laughed. It's better to meet by chance than by invitation. We are really fated. That's, Xiaohua said with a smile. Now that we are close to the Jade Pavilion, if the cultivators we meet are not going to the Jade Pavilion meeting, that would be strain. -12. Chapter 3575. Come, come, come. Changyu seemed to be very straightforward. He pointed to the two people behind him and said, "These are the two fellow Taoists I met on the way. The four of us are going to the Jade Pavilion together. It's really lively. I'm Zhu Chengli from Yangzhou Ruins Hu Mountain. Greetings to fellow Taoist Xiao." The person on the flying boat also had a smile on his face. The person on the flying sword next to him, although he looked a little unwilling, reluctantly cupped his hands and said, "I'm Wu Tianxin, from Yangzhou's Panshan Cave. Hee, I'm very happy to see you two fellow Taoists." Xiaohua smiled and cupped his hands, not because their cultivation was low. Ignore old Wu's dead face. Changyu looked at Wu Tianxin's appearance and didn't find it strange. He said to Xiaohua, "When you saw me before, he was also like that. Later, I heard from other fellow Taoists that he was originally like this. I don't know how many fellow Taoists he offended, but he didn't change. It's no wonder fellow Taoist Wu is like this." Zhu Qingli hastily explained. He didn't intend to participate in the Jade Pavilion gathering. However, I've encountered a bottleneck in my cultivation. It just so happens that a small country wants me to stand up for them, so I dragged fellow Taoist Wu to the Jade Pavilion. Xiaohua smiled, touched his nose and said, "It seems. I've never said that I care, right? Everyone has their own nature. As long as they don't hinder others, it's fine. Previously, when I saw the three of you aggressively chasing after me, I thought you three fellow Taoists had bad intentions. Now that I see you three fellow Taoists being so friendly, I've just calmed down. How could I care?" Hee. Changyu smiled embarrassedly. He didn't seem to be embarrassed. Presumably, he didn't have any dirty thoughts before. He looked at the Pegasus in front of Xiaohua and said, "Even if we have some plans, seeing that fellow Taoist Xiao dares to ride such a Pegasus, you should think about it in your heart, right? Besides, on the hidden immortal continent, our Tao sect has declined and is suppressed by Confucian cultivators. Even if we want to rule a country, we have to come to the Jade Pavilion to give face to Confucian cultivators. In this case, even if I can take fellow Taoist Pegasus, so what? Wouldn't it be better to directly kill a Confucian cultivator?" Haha, fellow Taoist Chong is rather straightforward. Xiaohua laughed. "Humph, all you know is fighting and killing." Wu Tianxin said coldly, "You kill me, I kill you. Sooner or later, both sides will suffer. The more I walk, the more scared I am. Fellow Taoists, listen to me. This Jade Pavilion gathering is definitely not a place to be taken lightly. While we haven't entered yet, we'd better get out of here as soon as possible." Old Wu. Changyu was not surprised. It seemed that he had heard these words several times. He turned back and said, "You are already in the middle stage of the Gold Core realm. If you want to enter the late stage of the Gold Core realm, have you prepared all the spiritual herbs and medicinal pills you need? I've already reached the bottleneck of the late Gold Core stage, but I've only prepared less than 30% of the things needed to conceive a nascent soul. If this goes on, I won't be able to conceive a baby within my lifespan. Instead of waiting for death like this, why don't I go to the Yaodai Palace and fight?" Fellow Taoist Wu, Senior Chong is right. Aren't you in an awkward situation now? Those spiritual herbs are useless for the cultivation of Confucian cultivators, but they have the spiritual herbs in their hands. Even if they ask great alchemists to refine them into ordinary medicines, they won't give them to us. If we don't have the support of a country and recruit disciples as the state preceptor, how can our cultivation progress further? If we take 10,000 steps back and die, won't we have no disciples at all? How can the inheritance of our Taoism continue? Zhu Qingli and the other two obviously argued a lot on the way, and today they argued again. It's easy for you and me to leave today, but maybe we'll have to come here again 10 years later. 10 years, these 10 years are nothing in our eyes. Maybe fellow Taoist Wu doesn't care, but in Senior Chang's eyes, these 10 years are a matter of life and death. How can he have 10 more years? If Senior Chang is like this, who knows when we'll be like this? Therefore, we should cherish every day and night on the road of cultivation. Do you think I don't know? Wu Tianxin rolled his eyes and said, I don't want to come to the Jade Pavilion because I want to save time for cultivation, right? Without elixirs and primordial stones, what can you do even if you have time? Changyu said with a smile. Facing Changyu, Wu Tianxin didn't dare to be as merciless as he was to Zhu Qingli. He could only smile bitterly and said, I don't think we can get anything more when we arrive at the Jade Pavilion. There's obviously a dark shadow in this Jade Pavilion gathering. What right do Taoist cultivators have to tell us what to do? Not to mention that a single state preceptor's lot can lead several Taoist cultivators to fight each other. Even if Taoist cultivators want the approval of Confucian cultivators to become state preceptors, we can see that Confucian cultivators are harboring evil intentions. Fellow Taoist Wu, you think too much. Zhu Qingli obviously didn't agree with Wu Tianxin's thoughts. He shook his head and said, the Jade Pavilion gathering has existed for many years in the hidden immortal continent, and many Taoist cultivators have become state preceptors. If there's a dark shadow, why don't others say it? Look at Senior Chang. Isn't he only willing to come to the Jade Pavilion gathering because the monarch of a country begged Senior Chang to become his disciple? In my opinion, there's nothing in this world that isn't a secret. Even if there are some secrets in the Jade Pavilion gathering, it's normal. Actually, if fellow Taoist Wu doesn't want to participate in the Jade Pavilion gathering, you can find a Taoist country and cultivate under the state preceptor. It's also possible. Xiao Hua's heart moved, and he interrupted. Wu Tianxin curled his lips and said self-deprecatingly, with my temper, how can I please others? Since I can't be their direct disciple, it's better for me to cultivate on my own. Forget it, let's not talk about it anymore. Changyu said with a smile, the four of us met for a reason. I don't know who will get the state preceptor's lot, but I can guarantee that as long as I can take charge of a country, I can ask the three of you to come out and help. Hee, thank you so much, Senior Chang. Zhu Qingli was very happy. He cupped his hands and thanked him. As for Xiao Hua and Wu Tianxin, they both smiled and didn't say much. Let's go, Xiao Hua said with a smile. I still have the same words. Everyone has their own thoughts, and everyone has their own fate. No one can force anyone. Since we've come to the edge of the Jade Pavilion, we'd better go and take a look first. No matter what, this is a real grand meeting of our Taoist sect. Yes, even if fellow Taoist Wu doesn't want to go in, it's possible to find things for cultivation. Zhu Qingli nodded again and again. Xiao Hua was stunned and asked curiously, fellow Taoists, do you mean that there are still auctions in the Jade Pavilion gathering? Why haven't I heard of it? It's not to the extent of auctions. Changyu said with a smile, I've heard that there are some ordinary exchanges, which have gradually started in the past 200 years. After all, our Taoist sect cultivators are in the minority. In the ordinary auctions in the hidden immortal continent, our Taoist sect cultivators use very few things. Now that we have a rare opportunity to gather together, each of us must have something that others want but we don't need. Hee, not bad. Xiao Hua smiled. Wasn't this the small trade gathering in the morning rain continent? It was exactly the opportunity he liked. The Jade Pavilion was a mountain and an extremely high mountain peak. However, the mountain range around the Jade Pavilion mountain was extremely vast. At a glance, it was thousands of miles and tens of thousands of miles. It was several times larger than the territory of an ordinary country in the hidden immortal continent. However, as the ancients said, the mountain was famous not because of its height, but because of its immortal. The water was famous not because of its depth, but because of its dragon. Although the Jade Pavilion Mountain was only a mountain peak, this mountain peak represented the mountain range that stretched for tens of thousands of miles. In front of the Jade Pavilion Mountain, the entire mountain range had no other name. However, even though the Jade Pavilion gathering was called the Jade Pavilion, it was also a grand meeting where Taoist sect cultivators gathered. However, the place where the Imperial Tutor's lot was truly obtained was not the Jade Pavilion Mountain. After the Jade Pavilion Mountain, within the Endless Mountain Range, there seemed to be no place where the Imperial Tutor's selection was not held. The entire mountain range was a place where Star-Lord Hall could freely display their abilities. 10 years ago, the selection competition might be held in a river. This year, it could be held in an ancient tree on the mountain peak. 10 years later, it could also be held in an inconspicuous cave. As for where it would be held 20 years later, it would depend on Star-Lord Hall's interest. Not only was the location of the selection different, even the selection method was not the same. Sometimes, a Taoist sect cultivator would sign up within a set time. Then, Star-Lord Hall would randomly group these cultivators together. In the end, some cultivators who won would obtain the Imperial Tutor's lot. Sometimes, all the Taoist sect cultivators would be divided into several groups. Every group would produce the Imperial Tutor's lot. There were even times when Star-Lord Hall did not choose the first few winners. Instead, they would first determine the rankings of the cultivators and then randomly draw a number. Whichever number was drawn, the corresponding cultivator would obtain the Imperial Tutor's lot. In particular, the number of the Imperial Tutor's lot in each Yaodai meeting was not always certain. Sometimes it was dozens, sometimes it was hundreds, and so on. Of course, among the many variables in the Yaodai meeting, there was one that was eternal. That was, no matter how the cultivators who entered the Yaodai meeting died, no one would care. In short, the Yaodai meeting was the rhythm of Star-Lord Hall using all the methods in the entire mountain range and using the Imperial Tutor's lot as bait to kill the Taoist sect cultivators who participated in the Yaodai meeting. But even so, whether it was those who could see the essence or those who could not see the essence, or those who had a plan in their heart, or those who had a fluke in their heart, the Tao sect cultivators of the 9 regions of the hidden immortal continent still appeared in the vicinity of Yaodai Mountain like carps crossing the river. How could Xiao Hua not be one of them? Xiao Hua, Chang Yu and the others flew like this for a few days. After exchanging what they knew, they finally understood why Immortal Li Xiang did not tell them the specific situation of the Yaodai meeting. Because everything could not be used as reference, and all the experiences could be the cause of death. Only in the Yaodai meeting, it was really wise to deal with all changes by sticking to the status quo. -12. Chapter 3576. As for Chang Yu and the other two, they were even more shocked. Although the past few days had not been long and they were still unable to see through Xiao Hua's cultivation, Wu Tianxin had inadvertently asked a few difficult questions about cultivation. He had originally wanted to ask Chang Yu for advice, but before Chang Yu could finish, Xiao Hua had mercilessly refuted him. Chang Yu was naturally unconvinced and brought out a few of his doubts to discuss. In the end, Xiao Hua did not have too many reservations and answered them in detail. So much so that other than Xiao Hua asking about the situation of the Jade Pavilion gathering and the situation of Qingzhou and Yangzhou, the 3 of them took turns to ask Xiao Hua for advice most of the time. In the distance, a blue stone mountain stood between heaven and earth like a jade tablet. The edge of the blue stone mountain was an undulating mountain range. The 3 of them were already incomparably respectful to Xiao Hua. Seeing Xiao Hua put away the Pegasus and flying chariot, the 3 of them hurriedly jumped down from the flying beast and flying boat. They put away their flying tools and stood respectfully beside Xiao Hua. Looking at the Yaodai Mountain, Xiao Hua could not help but be somewhat stunned. Previously, he had not released his divine perception to explore the Yaodai Mountain, so he did not know what they were feeling this time. However, what surprised him was not the Yaodai Mountain, but the area under the Yaodai Mountain. There were tents everywhere, and around these tents, there were many soldiers and generals in bright armor. The armors of these generals were different, and the military flags around the tents were also different. It was obvious that they were not of the same standard. Seeing Xiao Hua's somewhat surprised expression, Chang Yu hurriedly said, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, the vicinity of the Yaodai Mountain has been blocked by Confucian cultivators using a defensive formation. You cannot use your divine perception to explore. There are even some places that have counterattacks. Fellow Taoist, please do not forcibly break the formation." Chang Yu's tone was very respectful. Although he did not call Xiao Hua senior, it was no different from facing a senior. "No." Xiao Hua smiled and pointed at the tents. "This Xiao is wondering why there are so many soldiers." "Oh, fellow Taoist Xiao," Zhu Chengli also said, "these are not the soldiers of Star Lord Palace, nor are they arranged by any Confucian cultivator. These are all sent by various countries. Even many monarchs will come personally. Their goal is to recruit our Taoist cultivators." Some didn't have a big appetite. Whether it was those who participated in the Yaodai meeting or Taoist cultivators who came to watch the fun, as long as they met their requirements, they could get their offerings. Some came for the cultivators who got the imperial preceptor's lot. Of course, these countries should be established by Taoist cultivators. On the other hand, the former might have been founded by Confucian cultivators. These monarchs are just recruiting our Taoism cultivators to be their hired thugs. If they are sincere, why would they appear here? Wu Tianxin still spoke in an unsociable manner. No matter what, their presence here represents their attitude. Chang Yu said unhappily, moreover, their arrival can at least allow some Dao sect cultivators with shallow cultivation to have a place to stay. Old Wu, don't always look at things from the bad side. Xiao Hua smiled and said, "This Yaodai gathering is getting more and more interesting. Indeed, I've heard people talking about it before, but I didn't pay much attention to it. Now it seems that I've come a little late." Chang Yu nodded. "If I had come in the past, I might have encountered some opportunities. Hee, maybe we won't be able to go back," Xiao Hua faintly reminded. "Oh, this can't be, right?" Chang Yu was stunned. "I've never heard of Taoism cultivators who don't participate in the Yaodai gathering disappearing for no reason. If Taoism cultivators who disappear can send messages, can they be called disappearing?" Wu Tianxin replied with a somewhat sarcastic tone. "Fellow Taoist Xiao, you're thinking too much." Chang Yu said embarrassedly, "Even if the Confucian cultivators have such a plan, I'm afraid they won't really do it. Otherwise, who would come to the Yaodai gathering?" Xiao Hua shrugged his shoulders, pointed to the sky, pointed to the ground, and pointed to the mountain peak. He said with a smile, "Heaven knows, earth knows, Yaodai Mountain knows, but we Taoism cultivators don't know." Chang Yu wanted to say something again, but he saw a flying boat breaking through the sky from afar. A middle-aged Taoism cultivator was standing on it. So Chang Yu closed his mouth and stood in the air, waiting. In just a moment, the flying boat approached. Everyone could clearly see that the person on the flying boat was actually a cultivator of the second stage of Yuanli. When the cultivator saw the four people, he immediately bowed and said, "Junior greets the four seniors." When Xiao Hua and the others saw that this cultivator didn't report his name and flew from the direction of Yaodai Mountain, they already understood something. Chang Yu raised his hand and said with a smile, "No need to be so polite. Are you the reception envoy for the Yaodai gathering?" "Senior, there is no reception envoy for the Yaodai gathering this time. Junior is only here to give you the tokens to enter the Yaodai Mountain. As for the matter of entering the Yaodai Mountain in 10 days, Senior, please do as you please." As the cultivator spoke, he took out 4 bamboo slips from his bosom and respectfully presented them in front of the 4 people. Xiao Hua and the others took them and scanned them with their divine senses. They couldn't see anything special about these bamboo slips. Chang Yu hurriedly stopped the cultivator, who turned around and asked, "I want to ask you, since there is no reception envoy, how can we enter the Yaodai Mountain? Where can we wait for these 10 days? As far as I know, at the foot of the Yaodai Mountain, there have always been quiet rooms and caves for the cultivators who come to participate in the Yaodai gathering to rest." Who would have thought that the cultivator himself was completely clueless? He smiled bitterly and said, "Senior, this junior really doesn't know. This junior is in charge of everything within sight. Whenever a senior comes, this junior will hand over the token and not ask about anything else. If senior knows where there is a quiet room, senior can go." "Forget it. You can go." Changyu naturally wouldn't make things difficult for a junior with second-level essence force. He smiled and waved his hand to indicate that cultivator to go. Only then did he turn around and say to Xiao Hua, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, this time's Yaodai gathering is really loose." Previously, early gold core stage cultivators weren't allowed to enter the Yaodai mountain, and this disciple is only at the heartbeat stage. The seniors he mentioned even include spirit tranquil stage disciples. Could it be that this time's Yaodai gathering has more lots for the state preceptor than before? If there are more, won't fellow Taoist Chang be happy? Xiao Hua said with a smile. Fellow Taoist Chang will also have the opportunity to get the state preceptor's lot and become the state preceptor. Not at all, not at all. Chang Yu said with a smile. I only came to try my luck. Fellow Taoist Xiao is the one who is truly confident. Hee. Xiao Hua smiled and looked around. He said, since there's no restriction on where we can rest, we can just find a place to rest? Fellow Taoist Xiao doesn't know. Chang Yu explained, during the Yaodai gathering, although Star-Lord Hall didn't send any disciples to maintain order, there won't be any Confucian cultivators near the Yaodai mountain. After all, this is Star-Lord Hall's face. If we're too far away from the Yaodai mountain, it might not be safe. Therefore, I think it's better to go to the bottom of the Yaodai mountain first. Moreover, it's rare for us Tao disciples to gather together. If we're close, won't we be able to move around more? I don't care. I'll listen to fellow Taoist Chang. Xiao Hua had always been casual about this kind of matter and nodded in agreement. Xiao Hua naturally knew about the dangers near the Yaodai mountain. Even someone as strong as Xian Songzi had lost his physical body. Chang Yu and the others were simply no match for them. Wu Tianxin and Zhu Chengli naturally didn't have any objections. The three of them followed Chang Yu and slowly descended to the foot of the Yaodai mountain. Before the four of them arrived, Tao cultivators flew out from the numerous tents surrounding the Yaodai mountain. However, these cultivators seemed to have a tacit understanding. The ones who flew out first directly flew in front of Xiao Hua and the others. Moreover, the ones who were a few steps slower waited in midair. Seniors, please. The one who rushed out first was a short cultivator at the second grade of origin power. When this cultivator arrived in front of Chang Yu, he immediately bowed and said, I was sent by the state preceptor of Yangzhou's Fian Kingdom. I'm here to respectfully wait for Senior. I wonder if Senior is interested in accepting the offerings of my Fian Kingdom. The offerings of my Fian Kingdom. As he spoke, that cultivator very familiarly read out a long list of conditions. Then, he looked at Xiao Hua and the others with a smile. Chang Yu smiled and cupped his hands, saying, Thank your state preceptor on behalf of I. We're here to participate in the Yaodai gathering. Everything can wait until after the Yaodai gathering. All right, Junior understands. This is my Fian Kingdom's token. If Senior is interested, you can use this token to come to my Fian Kingdom. That cultivator didn't say anything else. He respectfully took out 4 swallow-like tokens from his bosom and handed them to Xiao Hua and the others. Xiao Hua smiled and extended his hand to receive them. Chang Yu and the others could only accept them. Then, that cultivator cupped his hands again and flew down. It didn't matter that Xiao Hua accepted the Fian Kingdom's tokens. Then, that cultivator who was waiting in midair stepped forward. This cultivator seemed to have heard Chang Yu's words. Without wasting any time, he took out a ring-shaped token and handed it to Xiao Hua and the others. He respectfully said, The offerings of my Fian Kingdom are all written in the token. Seniors, you'll know at a glance. Junior respectfully awaits Senior's arrival. After saying that, he flew down without any hesitation. Next, Xiao Hua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Dozens of cultivators handed over their tokens one after another. Xiao Hua somewhat refused, but when he saw that those cultivators were also eager, he didn't have the nerve to put down his face and could only accept them. Fortunately, a few other Taoist cultivators flew over from other places. The remaining cultivators wanted to be in the front, so they hurriedly handed over their tokens to the 4 people and hurriedly flew to the others. Looking at the strange token in his hand and thinking about the large pile of tokens in the small Chinquan bag, Xiao Hua's expression was extremely wonderful. This Yaodai gathering hadn't started yet. He hadn't even set foot on Yaodai Mountain yet, but his harvest was already so full. This really made Xiao Hua feel embarrassed. Fellow Taoist Xiao, Changyu couldn't help but laugh. He didn't blame him and said, "You're too soft-hearted. These countries, you definitely won't go. These tokens are trash. If you refuse at the beginning, the rest of the people may not necessarily follow. Look at those people. They're simply disdainful of these people." -12. Chapter 3577. As Changyu spoke, he pointed at the cultivators who arrived later than them. Sure enough, as Changyu said, those cultivators waved their hands and flew away without waiting for the low-level cultivators of the various countries to speak. Some of them even waved their hands, and a gust of wind blew those low-level cultivators away. Xiao Hua helplessly touched his forehead and said with a smile, "I'm not soft-hearted, but seeing that we're all Dao sect disciples, I have to be a little lenient." Haha. Wu Tianxin let out a rare laugh and looked at Xiao Hua with interest. Isn't fellow Daoist Xiao being soft-hearted? Although these so-called Dao sect cultivators wear the clothing of Dao sect cultivators, their hearts are already Confucian cultivators. They are even Dao sect lackeys cultivated by the various Confucian countries. Perhaps, Xiao Hua smiled. In fact, not to mention Dao sect cultivators, even if a few Confucian scholars came over with tokens with smiles on their faces, with Xiao Hua's temperament, he might not necessarily refuse. It was just a matter of taking a few more tokens and listening to a few more nonsense words in the air. It was just a small effort. While they were talking, the few Dao sect cultivators behind them passed through the many tents and barracks and flew into Yaodai Mountain. Those low-level cultivators who were recruiting talents didn't seem to be dejected and flew back to their respective barracks as if they had completed their mission. At the side of a small tent, a man in armor looked at Xiao Hua in disbelief. There was some hesitation and confusion between his brows, as if he knew Xiao Hua. He seemed to want to go over, but at the same time, he seemed to be thinking about something. Zhu Chengli thought differently from the others. With a smile, he said, "When we are waiting for gold core cultivators, those monarchs only sent low-level Dao League disciples to talk to us. If there are nascent soul cultivators here, I suppose the monarchs of various nations will come personally?" Changyu waved his hand and motioned for Xiao Hua and the others to fly down with him. At the same time, he said, "If fellow Taoists are nascent soul seniors, I'm afraid you'll be disappointed. For nascent soul seniors to come here, they must have a plan, and it's unlikely that they will be persuaded by these country lords. Moreover, if these country lords really want to invite nascent soul seniors to be state preceptors, they will have to wait until after the Yaodai conference." After flying past the continuous stretch of tents, they were already close to Yaodai Mountain. However, the scenery of Yaodai Mountain changed once again. The bluestone mountain from before began to become clear. The various sceneries on the mountain were rather eye-catching. There were relaxed green cypresses, waterfalls and small ponds, mountain paths, and even some immortal birds and ferocious beasts spreading their wings and leaping in the forest. However, after flying for a while, the scene gradually blurred. Layers of clouds began to appear in the sky. In the end, the entire Yaodai Mountain was covered by a layer of red clouds. Even the mountain range behind the Yaodai Mountain was connected to the entire sky, tightly covered by the red clouds. Not to mention that the clouds looked like ripples on water to the naked eye. Even divine sense was reflected by the layer of clouds. It was impossible to see the true appearance of the Yaodai Mountain. Confucian cultivators are so generous? He actually set up a defensive formation over the entire Yaodai Mountain range? Xiao Hua was somewhat aghast. However, after thinking about it, he understood. This Yaodai conference had been held for who knows how many years. Even if they set up a formation over several kilometers, it should have been completely covered over these years. Under the heavy pressure of the clouds, only a large area at the foot of the Yaodai Mountain could be seen. On this foothill, there were some palaces and some caves. Some of the palaces flickered with splendor, while some of the palaces were completely dark. The caves were the same. Occasionally, cultivators would fly out of the caves. These cultivators would either go to the palaces at the side or fly to a large plain at the foot of the mountain. On this plain, there were numerous pavilions that were less than a dozen feet in size. These pavilions had the same style. They were all square and appeared ordinary. However, they were all built with bluestone. They had doors and windows. Similarly, some of these pavilions were suffused with a bluestone splendor. Lines of talisman characters flickered within the splendor, while others were completely dull. Between the pavilions, there were some commonly seen spiritual trees. Some of them were blooming flowers, some bore fruits, and a strong fragrance assailed the nostrils. Fellow Taoist Xiao. Changyu saw that Xiao Hua only raised his head to look at the clouds and didn't care about those pavilions and palaces. He reminded in a low voice, "We want to find a suitable quiet room to rest. Do you think we should live together? Or do we cultivate separately?" Oh, the palaces at the foot of the mountain are reserved for nascent soul stage seniors. The similar pavilions and the quiet rooms in the caves are reserved for other cultivators. As long as there is no light, there will be no one. We can choose whatever we want. Oh, Xiao Hua nodded. He withdrew his gaze from the clouds and looked at the seemingly endless pavilions. He said, "What does fellow Taoist Chang think? I think that since we came together, we should help each other 10 days later. Why don't we live together? If something happens, we can take care of each other." Chang Yu looked at the fervent gaze of Zhu Chengli and the absent-minded Wu Tianxin and said, "Okay, we'll do as fellow Taoist Chang says." Xiao Hua didn't need to cultivate in any special way, so he nodded in agreement. However, before Chang Yu could say anything, he heard the sound of a tsunami behind him. It was as if a huge wave was coming from afar. Chang Yu was shocked. He hurriedly turned his head and saw that in the distant sky, there was indeed a layer of blue waves. Chang Yu couldn't help but be shocked. "What's going on?" "Nothing special. Take a closer look." Xiao Hua frowned and calmly replied. Xiao Hua had already released his divine sense. At this time, there were also many strong and weak divine senses sweeping out from all over the Yaodai mountain. The blue waves were like waves. In just a few breaths, they had already rushed into everyone's field of vision. On the blue waves, a huge ship came with the light. There were more than 10 huge sea turtles around the ship. On the turtles, there were more or less children dressed in Taoist robes. These children were holding flags that emitted a blue light. When the flags were waved, the shells of the sea turtles surged with the color of water. These colors of water connected to each other to form a majestic blue wave. The ship itself also emitted a blue light. This blue light combined with the blue waves of the sea turtles. It was as if the ship was drifting on the sea. Not only that, there were no less than 9 pythons in front of the ship. Each of the pythons was more than 10 feet long. They each spat out a blue light and pulled the ship in the direction of Xiao Hua and the others. "Damn it, which senior is this?" Zhu Chengli saw the imposing manner of the ship and couldn't help but cry out. Does a person with this kind of honor still need to participate in the Yaodai conference? As the ship got closer, a beam of light appeared. Another cultivator on the flying ship seemed to want to deliver the token of the Yaodai conference. However, the water on the ship splashed out and the cultivator was sent flying. He couldn't get close to the ship at all. "Hey, who are you? How dare you offend Taoist Yuanqing's backing?" A child flew out from the sea turtle closest to the cultivator and shouted harshly. The poor cultivator finally managed to stand firm on the flying ship. He cried out in fear, "I'm here to deliver the token of the Yaotai conference to Taoist Yuanqing. Give it to me." The child stretched out his hand and said, "But..." The cultivator looked at the people on the turtle, as well as the people on the boat that he couldn't see clearly. It seemed like he wanted to ask how many people were on the boat, but after muttering a few words, he didn't say anything. He reached out and took out a token. Before he could give it to the boy impatiently reached out and the token flew into the boy's hand. The boy didn't say anything and chased after the turtle. "Tsk tisk." Zhu Chengli smacked his lips and said, "A nascent soul senior is really powerful. Hee. Let's see what those who want to recruit Taoist cultivators will do." Wu Tianxin looked with interest at the tents behind him that seemed to outnumber the pavilions, and said with a smile. Unfortunately, Wu Tianxin was disappointed. The low-level Taoist cultivators from various countries who were flying like butterflies were now hiding in their tents. He didn't see any one of them. "Fellow Taoist Yuanqing, why are you moving after sitting still for so long?" At this moment, a silver rainbow light streaked across the sky. A young cultivator with a ruddy face stood high in the sky with a horsetail whisk in his hand. Hong Songzi, why are you here? A very high-pitched voice came from the ship. Then, a similar green water rushed out from the ship. A cultivator with long white eyebrows and a green Taoist robe appeared on the water. Hong Songzi, this senior is Hong Songzi? Chang Yu heard from the side and was pleasantly surprised. It seemed that he had admired Hong Songzi for a long time, similar to Chang Yu. Zhu Qingli's face also showed a kind of ecstasy. He pulled on Wu Tianxin's Taoist robe and couldn't suppress his excitement. He said in a low voice, "Fellow Taoist Wu, this senior is Taoist Yuanqing? It's unbelievable that I can see him here." Wu Tianxin was a bit aloof and didn't seem to care. However, his gaze was also looking at the two nascent soul cultivators in the sky. Are these two fellow Taoists very famous? Xiao Hua asked with interest. Of course. Chang Yu said proudly. This Hong Songzi is a cultivator from our Qing province's Cloud Dream Cave. He already had the strength of a nascent soul more than 1,000 years ago. Now, I'm afraid he has already reached the middle of the 4th grade of essence force. He is one of the famous Taoist cultivators in our Qing province. One of them? Xiao Hua smiled and asked. Then there must be others. Forgive me for being ignorant, but I wonder who these fellow Taoists are. Of course, Fire Mountain Range's Fairy Huafeng, Golden Jade Valley's young master Shua Jin, Lingyu Country's Taoist Qi Ping, Jie Xian Country's Cloud Dream Fairy, and so on. They are all nascent soul cultivators who are as famous as Senior Hong Songzi. Chang Yu said with great familiarity. Fire Mountain Range? Golden Jade Valley? Xiao Hua frowned. These nascent soul fellow Taoists don't need to be state teachers? Chapter 3578. Hee, fellow Taoist Xiao is too old-fashioned. Zhu Qingli was very excited and whispered, we don't have the resources to cultivate, so we can only look for them. However, although I haven't seen Volcano Ridge and Golden Jade Valley, it sounds like they are similar to Taoist Yuanqing's. They have resources such as small primordial stone veins near their caves. With these veins, these seniors can continue to cultivate without ruling a country. Humph, it's a pity that these spirit veins are so rare. We don't have the fortune. Wu Tianxin snorted. Even if we find these spirit veins, it'll only benefit others. Hearing this, Xiao Hua's interest was piqued. He smiled and said, these nascent soul Taoists, are they starting their own sects? Do Confucian cultivators allow them to be carefree? Who said Taoist Yuanqing started his own sect? He never accepts disciples. It's just that some Taoist countries send Taoist soldiers to him for guidance when they have the heart to do so. Zhu Qingli hurriedly said, then, fellow Taoists, are there any famous nascent soul cultivators in Yangzhou? Xiao Hua knew that there were always exceptions, so he didn't ask and changed the topic. Zhu Qingli smiled and said, other than Taoist Yuanqing of Lufeng Ridge, there's Elder Song of Jade Forest Ocean, Yi Country's Senior Yi Minji, Taoist Ming Chang of Heavenly Ruins Country, Celestial Yun of Cloud Country, cough, there are many. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. Not only did he not know about the nascent soul cultivators in Yangzhou and Qingzhou, he didn't even know about the nascent soul cultivators in Yuzhou. Previously, he had stayed with Taoist Li for a while, but he had rushed to Yaodai Mountain. Li Xiang was also disheartened and didn't want to talk about these things. Now, it seemed that he was really ignorant and inexperienced. Sure enough, after Zhu Qingli finished speaking, he asked with a smile, Yuzhou is quite far from Yangzhou, so I don't know about the nascent soul seniors in Yuzhou. I wonder if fellow Taoist Xiao can tell me about them? This, Xiao Hua rubbed his nose. Just as he was about to speak, Taoist Yuanqing and Hong Songzi seemed to have finished their conversation. Taoist Yuanqing casually sent out a summoning talisman, and the boat rumbled again. Unexpectedly, the blue waves surged violently as it flew into the distance. Only a dozen or so attendants flew out from the boat and stood in midair. The two nascent soul cultivators turned their gazes and scanned the surroundings with their spiritual will. The two nascent soul cultivators naturally weren't looking at Xiao Hua and the others. What they cared about was the continuous stretch of tints below them. However, whether it was Chang Yu, Zhu Qingli, Wu Tianxin, Or even those Taoist cultivators who stopped in midair in the distance and didn't dare to casually fly, they hurriedly bowed in greeting, fearing that they would be negligent. As a result, Xiao Hua was like a crane among chickens. How arrogant was Taoist Yuan Qing? With a single glance, he saw Xiao Hua standing there with a smile on his face. He frowned, and a strange expression flashed in his eyes. After that, his divine sense gushed towards Xiao Hua like a tidal wave. However, Xiao Hua didn't care. He was like a mountain. No matter how strong his divine sense was, he didn't care at all. Xiao Hua was naturally unharmed. But Chang Yu and the others were too close to Xiao Hua and were unavoidably affected. The three of them swayed slightly, their faces somewhat pale. Xiao Hua waved his hand, but with a flash of brilliance, Taoist Yuan Qing immediately felt as if his divine sense had been forcefully pushed back by several feet. Taoist Yuan Qing's expression immediately changed slightly. Beside him, Hong Songzi saw Xiao Hua and naturally frowned. A faint blue light flashed in his eyes, as if he was using some kind of secret technique. However, Taoist Yuan Qing's expression changed, and Hong Songzi's expression also changed, because he seemed to be unable to use his secret technique to perceive Xiao Hua's cultivation. The two of them looked at each other and didn't dare to be negligent. They hurriedly flew down from the sky and cupped their hands in greeting from afar. Greetings, fellow Taoist. May I know where fellow Taoist came from? Are you also here to participate in the Jadestige meeting? Seeing the two nascent soul cultivators so humble, Chang Yu and the others somewhat didn't dare to believe their eyes. They knew that Xiao Hua's cultivation was higher than theirs, but in their opinion, he was merely at the upper third grade of essence energy or the lower fourth grade of essence energy. They had never thought that a Taoist cultivator at the middle fourth grade of essence energy would be so amiable. I am Xiao Hua of Yu Province's Black Cloud Ridge. Greetings, fellow Taoists. Xiao Hua raised his hand to return the greeting. I am here to participate in the Jadestige meeting. Xiao Hua. Taoist Yuan Qing was even more surprised. He looked at Hong Songzi beside him, and Hong Songzi also slightly shook his head. Obviously, the two of them had never heard of Xiao Hua's name. Taoist Xiao, you're hiding your strength. If I didn't look twice, wouldn't I have missed fellow Taoist? Taoist Yuan Qing smiled. I am Taoist Yuan Qing of Yang Province's Luffing Ridge. This is Hong Songzi of Qing Province's Cloud Dream Cave. On the hidden immortal continent, there are not many nascent soul cultivators in my Taoist sect. Since we are all here to participate in the Jadestige meeting, why don't we get to know each other? Hee, fellow Taoists, please go ahead. Xiao Hua looked at Zhu Chengli and the others beside him and smiled. How about I pay you two a visit after I settle down? Okay, Hong Songzi looked at Xiao Hua's surroundings. He knew that Xiao Hua didn't bring any attendants with him. He nodded and said, Fellow Taoist Xiao, please take a rest first. Later, I will send some attendants to invite fellow Taoist. I'll follow fellow Taoist's arrangement. Xiao Hua smiled and agreed. Soon after, the two of them cupped their hands towards Xiao Hua and flew away. They brought along a dozen attendants and landed in the palace at the foot of Yaotai Mountain. Senior Xiao. Chang Yu smiled bitterly and said, Senior, you've really played with this junior. These past few days, you've really made this junior lose face. Haha, since you know this Xiao's temper, then there's no need to be so polite. Xiao Hua saw the respect in Chang Yu's tone and the smile on his face. He knew that Chang Yu had already grasped his temper. You all, follow this Xiao to the palace used by nascent soul cultivators. Yes, Junior will listen to Senior Zhao's instructions. Chang Yu and Zhu Chungli's voices were rather respectful. However, Wu Tianxin seemed to be a bit reserved. After all, he had complained a lot along the way. Thinking about it now, he felt very embarrassed. Chang Yu, you lead the way. Xiao Hua instructed. Chang Yu took the lead and flew towards Yaodai Mountain. The crowd in the distance and many people in the underground tent saw this scene. They all whispered in the distance. They didn't dare to sweep their divine senses over. They looked over again and again, wanting to know what was so special about Xiao Hua. Of course, the eyes of the man who was hiding at the side of the tent flashed with ecstasy. He stared straight at the place where Xiao Hua landed. He seemed to have made a decision. Unfortunately, Even when Xiao Hua landed at the foot of Yaodai Mountain with Chang Yu and the others, they still didn't discover anything. At the foot of Yaodai Mountain, the palaces were different from the pavilions. They had different styles and sizes. Many of the palaces were already flashing with brilliance. The restrictions inside had already been activated. It was obvious that there were already people inside. However, there weren't many of these palaces. Xiaohua took a glance and knew that there were about 20 of them. These 20 or so palaces were naturally the minority, but the number made Xiaohua's heart startled. These were nascent soul cultivators. On Dawn Rain Continent, they were already grandmaster figures who established their own sections. How many nascent soul cultivators appeared in the Sword Dao Great War? On this small Yaodai Mountain, on the hidden immortal continent where Confucian cultivators stood in great numbers, there were actually 20 nascent soul cultivators all of a sudden. How could Xiaohua not be shocked? Of course, after thinking about it a little, Xiaohua had some understanding. Although the Dawn Rain Continent was a flourishing Dao sect, its territory couldn't be considered vast. It didn't seem to be as big as the hidden immortal continent. Moreover, when he was on the Dawn Rain Continent, although he already had nascent soul strength, he was still a gold core cultivator. Even before the Sword Dao War, he was still a Foundation Establishment disciple. Even if the Dawn Rain Continent had a grand event like the Yaodai Conference, he couldn't participate. How many nascent soul cultivators could he know? Take the Imperial Thunder Sect as an example. At most, he had seen the 8 Palace Masters. Who knew if there were any more powerful elders? Senior, what do you think of this palace? Seeing Xiaohua not speaking, Chang Yu pointed at a rather exquisite small palace and asked in a low voice, "And here it is." Xiaohua had never had any requirements for these things. He nodded and answered. Then, he swept his divine sense and immediately found that there was a strange magic power fluctuation at the palace gate. When he probed with his divine sense, he only felt that the jade carving of a horsetail whisk outside the palace gate gave birth to a very weak suction force. Thinking for a moment, Xiaohua looked at the brilliance of the palace beside him and sent out his divine sense. In an instant, a strong suction force rushed out from the jade carving. Just as Xiaohua frowned, it suddenly stopped. Then, a palm-sized jade tablet rushed out from the jade carving's horsetail whisk. Xiaohua waved his hand, and the jade tablet appeared in his hand. He looked at it with his divine sense and said with a smile, "So that's how it is. This so-called Star-Lord Palace is also interesting. All the decorations and restrictions are Dao sect magic. There's no trace of Confucian cultivation at all. I'm afraid if it's too much, it will make us Dao sect disciples feel disgusted," Zhu Chengli said in a low voice. "Quick!" Xiaohua touched the jade tablet with his hand. The jade tablet immediately emitted a cluster of light that rushed into the palace door. The palace door lit up as if it was the finishing touch. The light began to spread along the palace walls and other places. Not long after, layers of Dao talisman scripts appeared on the entire palace walls. "Let's go in." Xiaohua waved his hand again, and the jade tablet fell on the palace gate. The palace gate silently opened, revealing the splendor inside. The 4 people walked into the palace and released their divine sense. After a little exploration, they all smiled. This palace only had 4 quiet rooms, 1 big and 3 small. There was no need to divide them. Senior Xiao, Junior will take his leave first. Chang Yu bowed first. "I'll pay my respects to Senior tomorrow. No need to be so polite." Xiaohua waved his hand. "The Jade Pavilion gathering will be in 10 days. It's better for you all to cultivate quietly. Even if you can't get the Imperial Teacher's lot, it's also good to get some rare spirit fruits." Yes. Senior, please rest. Junior will take his leave." Zhu Chengli hurriedly bowed and saluted. Following Chang Yu, Wu Tianxin, and the other 2 didn't need to discuss anything. They each occupied a quiet room. -12. Chapter 3579. Chang Yu and the others were filled with thoughts in the quiet room. They were surprised by their encounters these days. If there was a pin in the cave, they might have written some stories about nascent soul cultivators. When Xiaohua entered the quiet room, that quiet room was different from the splendor of the palace hall. It looked very simple and crude. Other than a jade bed, There was nothing else. Xiaohua released his soul consciousness and scanned the room. He didn't find anything out of the ordinary. With a wave of his hand, he took out 100 jade talismans and placed them around the room. After activating the capital star formation, he sat cross-legged on the jade bed and reached out to take Xian Songzi's ink cloud pupil from the dragon vein. He released his divine sense and carefully studied it. After an unknown period of time, Xiaohua suddenly opened his eyes and looked at the entrance of the quiet room. There was a flash of surprise in his eyes. Then, Xiaohua gave the ink cloud pupil to Dragon Vein Xiaohua. He waved his hand and the entrance of the quiet room flashed. He said, "Wu Tianxin, what's the matter?" At the door was Wu Tianxin, a middle gold core stage cultivator, waiting. At this moment, hearing Xiaohua's voice, a complicated expression appeared on Wu Tianxin's face. He turned around to look at the empty palace, clenched his teeth, and quickly walked into the quiet room. Before he reached the center of the quiet room, he actually knelt on the ground with a plop and begged, "Senior Xiao, please save this junior's life." What do you mean? Xiaohua didn't expect Wu Tianxin to kneel and ask him to save his life. He didn't see anything unusual with Wu Tianxin along the way. Xiaohua could only wave his sleeve and lift Wu Tianxin up. He said anxiously, "Get up and tell me in detail." "Oh, don't worry, even if Taoist Yuan Qing wants your life. As long as you are in the right, I will help you." Yes, Wu Tianxin asked Xiaohua for help. It could only be because of a grudge with a nascent soul cultivator. If it was most likely, then it was Taoist Yuan Qing. "Thank you, senior." Wu Tianxin took advantage of the situation and stood up. Hearing Xiaohua's words, he smiled bitterly and said, "Senior, you're thinking too much." Although Junior's mouth is not virtuous and likes to nag when encountering problems, and even somewhat cynical, Junior still has self-awareness and will absolutely not offend someone who shouldn't be offended. "Oh, what could it be?" Xiaohua asked curiously. "Tell me about it first. This old man will also think about it and see how I can help you." "Senior." Wu Tianxin looked at Xiaohua. He was somewhat hesitant. Then, he asked tentatively, "If this junior says that this junior doesn't have anything to ask for senior's help right now, but this junior would like to ask senior to save this junior's life in the future, well, perhaps at the Jade Pavilion conference, would senior believe me?" Xiaohua smiled and nodded. "Of course I believe you. Why wouldn't this old man believe you?" Looking at Xiaohua's calm appearance, Wu Tianxin was extremely disappointed. He sighed and said, "Senior Xiao, Junior knows that you don't believe Junior. But I really want to ask you to save my life in the future." "Hee, Wu Tianxin, this old man has already said that I believe you. Why don't you believe me?" Xiaohua said with a smile, "You also underestimate the magical abilities of us nascent soul cultivators too much. Not to mention that the Jade Pavilion conference is close at hand. This old man and other nascent soul cultivators can sense good and bad luck on a whim. Even if, an ominous omen several months later, this old man and other nascent soul cultivators can still sense it. What Junior said is not the same as what Senior said." Wu Tianxin bit his lips and said in a low voice, "Junior's cultivation is not that high. Junior can only sense that my life is at stake. If I can't find someone to help me in time, I may die at any time. That's a bit strange." Xiaohua looked pensive. He looked at Wu Tianxin and said with a smile, "Since you know that the Jade Pavilion conference points to disaster, why did you still come thousands of miles to Yaodai Mountain? Of course, even if you came to Yaodai Mountain, you wouldn't have participated in the Jade Pavilion conference at the beginning. Wouldn't that have been fine?" "Senior." Wu Tianxin was on the verge of tears. After thinking for a moment, he said, "Senior, do you believe that there is someone who knows what might happen 10,000 miles away from Yaodai Mountain tomorrow? Or that someone related to this person will appear 10,000 miles away tomorrow? Isn't it just a divination technique? Or it's called foresight?" Xiaohua was not surprised. He said with a smile, "Could it be that you know this technique?" Wu Tianxin was stunned. It was as if he was struck by lightning. He looked at Xiaohua foolishly. After a long while, he did not answer Xiaohua's question and asked, "Senior Xiao, do you know this technique?" "I know a little." Xiaohua did not hide it. He said with a smile, It's just that this old man's cultivation is shallow and has only touched the surface. Senior, save me. Wu Tianxin said no more. He knelt down and kowtowed again. Xiao Hua was displeased. He did not help Wu Tianxin up and said indifferently, Wu Tianxin, since you asked me to save you, why are you hiding it and not daring to say it? How can there be such a logic in begging others in this world? This is also because this old man knows that although your mouth is not good, your character is not bad. Otherwise, I would absolutely not agree. Senior, please forgive me. This junior knows his mistake. Wu Tianxin did not dare to get up. He said in a low voice, this junior is also afraid. This junior's cultivation is not as good as senior's, but this junior also knows the principle that an ordinary man's wealth is his own ruin. Speak. What is it? Xiao Hua waved his hand. This old man will not covet your secret divination technique. Wu Tianxin clenched his teeth and said in a low voice, Senior, can you open the restrictions on the quiet room? Xiao Hua smiled. He knew that Wu Tianxin was worried. He waved his hand, and the capital star array was activated. Wu Tianxin released his divine sense. Seeing that his divine sense could not penetrate the array, he felt relieved and began to explain his situation. After Xiao Hua finished listening to Wu Tianxin's words, although he had already expected it, he was still dumbfounded. This was because Wu Tianxin was somewhat similar to Lu Yi. He had a kind of innate talent that allowed him to distinguish between good and bad. Wu Tianxin also relied on this ability to seek advantages and avoid disadvantages. At the beginning, his cultivation path could be considered smooth sailing. After his cultivation reached the fusion stage, which was the peak of the aura refining realm, he inadvertently obtained an incomplete nameless cultivation technique. This cultivation technique's words were obscure, and others could not understand it at all. However, Wu Tianxin relied on his own intuition and knew that this thing was very important to him. He spent a total of 200 years comprehending it. In the end, although he was not proficient in it, he still had a basic understanding of it and knew that this was a mysterious divination technique. However, at this point, it was impossible for Wu Tianxin to comprehend it further. No matter how he racked his brains and tried to think of a way, he could not comprehend even the slightest bit. Wu Tianxin was naturally unwilling. At first, he took a part of this thing to ask others for guidance. No one with the same cultivation as him could understand it. As for those with higher cultivation than him, he did not dare to be too ostentatious. Every time, he would first sense whether or not it was safe before taking out the thing to ask for guidance. However, how could human nature be measured by his half-baked divination technique? There were many times when he almost lost his life in the hands of others. Later, he no longer dared to take risks. He would rather think hard than ask others for guidance. This was also the reason why Wu Tianxin's words were usually very cynical. It was also the reason why Wu Tianxin did not dare to explain it to Xiao Hua. Relying on the divination technique that Wu Tianxin did not understand, relying on his innate intuition, Wu Tianxin felt that he was about to face a great tribulation several decades ago. This great tribulation was not related to cultivation, but what it was specifically and where it would appear, he did not understand. In these several decades, Wu Tianxin cultivated day and night in order to improve his strength so that he could deal with the Great Tribulation. However, even though Wu Tianxin had already cultivated to the middle stage of Jindan and could be considered as a somewhat famous Taoist cultivator in Yangzhou, the feeling of dark clouds pressing down on him did not disappear. Instead, it became more and more intense. Especially in recent years, Wu Tianxin almost felt like he could not breathe. Wu Tianxin simply stopped cultivating. Instead, he spent nearly 10 years calmly divining according to the secret divination technique. In the end, Wu Tianxin vaguely knew that he absolutely could not overcome this difficulty. Moreover, his opportunity was not in Yangzhou, not in the Panshan cave. However, he did not know where it was or who to ask for help. At this time, it just so happened that Zhu Qingli of Shuhu Mountain invited Wu Tianxin to go to Yaodai Mountain to participate in the Yaodai Assembly. Normally, Wu Tianxin, who had no interest in ruling a country, would absolutely not agree. However, at this time, his heart was moved. He knew that this was an opportunity. Perhaps he could find his own way out. Therefore, Wu Tianxin went out with Zhu Chengli. Unfortunately, Wu Tianxin first met Changyu. Changyu's character was not bad, but his attitude as a senior made Wu Tianxin feel uncomfortable. Especially when Wu Tianxin asked about some divination techniques, Changyu did not know anything. Wu Tianxin was discouraged. He only wanted to go to Yaodai Mountain and ask other Yuanian cultivators to take a look. When he met Xiaohua, Wu Tianxin simply did not care. Xiaohua was really too used to being a low-level cultivator. Wu Tianxin simply did not see a trace of Xiaohua's awareness as a Yuanian cultivator. Xiaohua's whole body was filled with amiability and amiability. Therefore, Wu Tianxin did not have the heart to ask him for help. Only when Xiaohua's depth was seen through by Taoist Master Yuan Qing and the others did Wu Tianxin become vigilant. When Wu Tianxin hid in a quiet room and once again used divination techniques, he suddenly discovered that he was really in imminent danger. Moreover, this danger seemed to be on Yaodai Mountain. Just when Wu Tianxin was in despair, he discovered a trace of life. As for where this life was, how could Wu Tianxin know with his current cultivation level? And Xiaohua was naturally the only water plant that Wu Tianxin could grasp. Alas, this is really unimaginable. Xiaohua sighed. If you weren't on Yaodai Mountain, perhaps you wouldn't have to worry about your life. However, it was precisely because you sensed a life force outside the Pan Mountain cave that you came to Yaodai Mountain. Tell me, should you come to Yaodai Mountain in the end? Even if you don't want to come, even if you want to go back now, don't you also sense a certain death situation? Wu Tianxin nodded with a sullen face. Obviously, he himself had long sensed it and used divination techniques to divine it. -12. Chapter 3580. You can get up. Xiaohua waved his hand. Presumably, you never mentioned this to Zhu Qingli and Changyu, right? Junior doesn't dare to speak casually. Wu Tianxin got up and said in a low voice. Then, do you think I was able to save you because of your divination technique? Xiaohua asked again. Wu Tianxin shook his head. Junior can't divine this. However, Junior already has this kind of perception. Hee. Xiaohua shook his head with a smile. I'm afraid it's not perception, but what you think. You only know me as a nascent soul cultivator in the entire Yaodai Mountain. Who else can you find if not me? Junior's mind is already in a mess. Wu Tianxin didn't know what to say and said helplessly, Junior didn't intend to participate in the Yaodai conference before, but now it seems that I must participate and will inevitably encounter great danger. If possible, I ask Senior to save me. That's not a problem. Xiaohua simply agreed. If I can help you, I will naturally help you. Thank you, Senior, thank you. Wu Tianxin hurriedly thanked him. Also, Xiaohua asked again, did you perceive your own danger or the danger of the Yaodai conference? What danger will there be in the Yaodai conference? Wu Tianxin was puzzled. Junior can only perceive my own danger and the divination technique. Didn't show any danger in the Yaodai conference? Xiaohua responded thoughtfully. He understood that he had been comprehending the hand of karma for so many years, but he still couldn't accurately perceive karma. Wu Tianxin's cultivation was even worse. If he didn't have an innate talent, he probably wouldn't be able to perceive some things now. Then Junior will take his leave. Wu Tianxin clenched his teeth and said in a low voice. Xiaohua smiled and said, don't worry. Since you want to participate in the Yaodai conference, follow me. If there are any benefits, I will give it to you. If you encounter any difficulties, I will definitely help you. Junior doesn't dare to say too much about Senior's great kindness at this time. It won't be too late to say more after Junior escapes this disaster. Wu Tianxin bowed again and waited for Xiaohua to remove the restriction of the quiet room before slowly leaving. Things in this world are really interesting. There are so many capable people. Looking at Wu Tianxin's somewhat excited back, a trace of a smile hung on the corner of Xiaohua's mouth. Since the hidden immortal continent is like this, the Dawn Rain continent must also be like this. Unfortunately, this Zhao's cultivation was really shallow when he was in the Dawn Rain continent, so he couldn't see things as high as this. Juxia. Very naturally, the mysterious Juxia who could predict the future appeared in Xiaohua's mind. Of course, compared to Juxia's beauty, The importance of being able to predict the future in Xiao Hua's heart was still far behind. Seeing that Xiao Hua's expression was a little dazed, the silver-gray color in his eyes gradually rose, and the traces of the galaxy suddenly appeared. Outside the quiet room, the sound of footsteps sounded again. A faint green light flashed between Xiao Hua's eyebrows. His eyes slightly shook, and those pitch-black eyes of his regained their color. In fact, Xiao Hua didn't need to look anymore. He already knew who it was. Sure enough, before long, the smile on Zhu Chungli's face was like a flower. The spirit pills bestowed by Xiao Hua were exactly what he needed. Under his pleading, Xiao Hua even gave him a nascent soul cultivation method. Of course, as for whether or not he could cultivate to the nascent soul stage, that was not something Xiao Hua could know. At this time, Xiao Hua simply didn't comprehend any cultivation method. He took out a scroll and read it with great interest. Confucian cultivators were the same as Taoist cultivators. Both good and bad were mixed. However, the scrolls left behind by Confucian cultivators for so many years were the real deal. The vast number of articles were filled with penetrating insight. Every time he read an article, every time he read a scroll, Xiao Hua could feel the writer's heart and experience the awe-inspiring intent within. Fu Jiwen was right. The awe-inspiring aura was the foundation, but the awe-inspiring aura itself was dead. It was the cultivation of Confucian cultivators, and it was the breathing of Confucian cultivators that gave the awe-inspiring aura vitality. This vitality was precipitated in the awe-inspiring aura. Whether it was thousands of years, 10,000 years, or hundreds of millions of years, as long as there were Confucian cultivators and articles passed down, the awe-inspiring aura would exist. This kind of inheritance was beyond the reach of Taoist cultivators. Sometimes, Xiao Hua even had an illusion that the awe-inspiring aura inheritance of Confucian cultivators was borrowed from the inheritance in the mind of the evil spirit. Of course, Xiao Hua's Buddha Sarira was also studying Buddhist scriptures and cultivating Buddhist Dharma. It was similarly broad and profound, causing the Buddha Sarira to be intoxicated. Now, the time it spent studying Buddhist scriptures had exceeded the time it spent cultivating Dharma. If Xiao Hua hadn't come into contact with the scrolls of Confucian cultivators before, he would have ordered the Buddha relic to focus on cultivating Buddhist doctrine. However, after looking at the scrolls and Buddhist doctrine, Xiao Hua knew that Buddhist scriptures were the foundation of Buddhist doctrine. Buddhist doctrine was only a minor detail. Looking at Guzhan's situation and looking at Manjushri Bodhisattva's fruit, if he focused on Buddhist doctrine, it would really be putting the cart before the horse, picking up sesame seeds and throwing away watermelons. Demons. How do they cultivate? In an instant, Xiao Hua, who was reading the scrolls, was distracted again. When he was in the Dawn Rain continent, Xiao Hua had seen beast cultivators. At first, he thought that they should be formed by combining weapon cultivators and demon cultivators. However, ordinary demon cultivators, as the name implied, were cultivators who cultivated demonic arts. Since they were cultivators, they were humans. On the hidden immortal continent, whether it was Taoist cultivators, Confucian cultivators, or Buddhist cultivators, they could all be called cultivators. However, the demons of the Thousand Demons sacred realm were different. They were not humans. Moreover, according to High Wind Old Monster, they never considered themselves as cultivators. Therefore, they could not be called demon cultivators, because they were demons or evil spirits. According to what I know, in the gradually growing memories of Little Yellow and Little Black, they should be imprints of inheritance, just like the phoenix imprint on Fairy Hong Xia's forehead. Since Fairy Hong Xia and other cultivators with genuine bloodlines can obtain the inheritance of these imprints, then wouldn't the demons be even more privileged? If that's the case, then what about the two bones in the demon formation of Chinyu Mountain? There seem to be some runes on the bones. Then how do you explain the stellar energy that the demon formation drew upon? Xiao Hua thought more and more. After a long while, the entire palace was silent, as if there was no one around. Suddenly, Xiao Hua raised his eyebrows, looked at the book in his hand, smiled, and muttered to himself, "If I don't understand the cultivation techniques of the Buddhist sect, then I have no place to ask. But how does this demon cultivate? Why should I think so much? With these two children, Little Yellow and Little Black, what do I have to worry about? When they come back, can't I just ask them properly? With that thought in mind, Xiaohua once again concentrated on reading the book. At the top of his head, wisps of clear air were produced, slowly dissipating. Half a day passed unknowingly. Xiaohua put down the book, stretched, and casually swept his gaze across the quiet room. The restriction outside the quiet room was not activated, and said with a smile, "This fellow Chong, you can keep his composure. Looks like he's a somewhat shrewd cultivator." Just as Xiaohua was about to pick up the book again, he frowned and said with a helpless smile, "Chong, you didn't come, but Taoist Yuanqing did." However, when he released his divine sense to investigate, a strange expression appeared on his face, and he asked curiously, why did he come to Yaodai Mountain? Soon after, Xiaohua stood up again and said with a smile, "No matter what, he's an old friend. I have to personally welcome him." Xiaohua walked out of the quiet room, and Chang Yu immediately sensed it. He hurriedly came out of the quiet room, bowed, and said, "Senior Xiao, is there something wrong?" "Nothing. You wait here and meditate. This old man has an old friend coming to visit." Xiaohua waved his hand. Chang Yu did not ask any more, and returned to the quiet room with cupped hands. Xiaohua walked to the palace door, and with a wave of his hand, the palace door flashed with brilliance and silently opened again. Outside the palace door stood a person with a large head. On the face of this head, there was a pair of broom-like eyebrows and 2 leopard eyes. Previously, there was shock in those eyes, but now it was replaced with fear and surprise. Wasn't this the Black Horse Cavalry General of the left, Xue Ping? "I'm late. Fellow Taoist Xue has been waiting for a long time," Xiaohua said with a smile. Xue Ping hurriedly bowed and said, "Junior Xue Ping greets Senior Xiao. Previously, I really didn't know Senior Xiao's true identity. I was too rude. Please forgive me." It's fine, it's fine." Xiaohua helped Xue Ping up and said, "Those who don't know are not guilty." At that time, this old man was only traveling in the country of Xi, and did not intend to let more people know my identity. It would be strange if fellow Taoist Xue found out. "Senior, please call me Xue Ping, otherwise this junior will feel awkward." Xue Ping stood up and said pitifully, his face full of embarrassment. That's right, that day, Xue Ping aggressively tested Xiaohua's strength, and even wanted to promote Xiaohua to the position of right general. Who would have thought that in just a year, he would become a nascent soul senior? This leap was so big that Xue Ping felt like he was in a dream. Therefore, when Xue Ping was standing beside the tent, he did not dare to approach, and only now did he make up his mind to pay his respects. Xiaohua nodded, turned around and said, "This old man understands. You may come in." "Yes." Xue Ping nodded obediently and followed Xiaohua into the palace. Xiaohua did not return to the quiet room, but sat at the head of the palace. Xue Ping naturally did not dare to overstep, and stood respectfully in front of the jade table, quietly waiting for Xiaohua to speak. Xiaohua waved his hand and took out a jade plate containing some spirit fruits. He placed it on the jade table beside him and said with a smile, "Xue Ping, have a seat. Have a taste of the spirit fruits first, then we can talk slowly." "Yes, this junior thanks senior for the fruit." Xue Ping did not dare to be negligent. After bowing and thanking him, he sat down and picked up a spirit fruit to taste carefully. Seeing that Xue Ping was still so reserved, Xiaohua smiled and said, "Xue Ping, why did you come to Yaodai Mountain instead of being the left general in the country of Xi's Nanpu County? It seems that your cultivation is not enough to be the state preceptor. Could it be that you came here specifically to wait for this old man? Could it be that you have the ability to predict the future?" -12. Chapter 3581. Xiaohua was obviously joking, but when Xue Ping heard it, his heart calmed down. He hurriedly put down the spirit fruit and said respectfully, "Senior, please know that I'm no longer the left general. Oh, I should say that I'm no longer in the country of Xi's Nanpu County." "Oh?" Xiaohua raised his brows and asked curiously, "You were doing well in the country of Xi's Nanpu County. Why did you go somewhere else?" At this point, Xiaohua hurriedly smiled and said, "Oh, that's right. I remember that I had an agreement with you. However, because I really didn't have the time to leave, I kept delaying it." "Don't worry." Did did you already go there? And you returned with a full load. So you're no longer working in the country of Shi? No, it's not what Senior thinks. Shueping hurriedly waved his hand and said, without an expert like Senior leading the way, I wouldn't dare to go there. If Senior has the time in the future and wants to go there, I'm willing to bring you there. I see. Xiaohua scratched his chin and nodded. After the Yaodai summit, I will have some free time. If you have the time, why don't we travel together? Great, great. Shueping was overjoyed and scratched his head. Xiaohua looked at Shueping with a faint smile and said, Shueping, don't tell me you chased me all the way to Yaodai Mountain and wanted me to fulfill my promise? Shueping hurriedly reined in his joy and smiled apologetically. Senior Xiao, you're mistaken. How could I know that Senior would come to Yaodai Mountain? I'm only following my general to Yaodai Mountain. Oh. Xiaohua nodded. It seems like you had a fortuitous encounter after leaving the country of Shi. Shueping smiled bitterly. Senior, you must be joking. How could I have a fortuitous encounter? It's better to say that I was forced to leave the country of Shi. Have a seat. Let's talk while eating. Xiaohua smiled and pointed at the spirit fruits on Shueping's table. He took out some spirit fruits and took a bite. Seeing Xiaohua's behavior, Shueping was somewhat relieved. He squeezed out a smile on his face that was as black as the bottom of a pot. He picked up a spirit fruit from the table and took a few bites. Senior, you're really enjoying yourself. It's been a long time since I've enjoyed such a wondrous spirit fruit. It's nothing. It's just a small token of appreciation from some juniors. It would be impolite for this old man to refuse, Xiaohua said with a slight smile. Shueping ate a few spirit fruits before wiping his mouth and smiling embarrassedly. Senior, I was ordered by the prefectural governor to go to Longevity Town to provide disaster relief. Thanks to Senior's grain, the townspeople didn't suffer too much of a disaster. With the help of Imo Yin and Imo Jianli, this junior has also successfully completed the important task of disaster relief. However, even though I had completed my mission, something unexpected happened when I was about to leave Longevity Town. Shueping stole a glance at Xiaohua's expression. Xiaohua seemed to be tasting the spirit fruits while listening to Shueping's explanation. Seeing that Shueping had stopped, he raised his head naturally and asked curiously, What's wrong? What could possibly happen in Longevity Town that you didn't expect? This old man hasn't heard any news from Longevity Town for a long time after I left. I do miss the monks of Shaojin Temple. Haha. Shueping chuckled. Senior, you're truly a playboy. With your cultivation, I'm afraid you can destroy the Shaojin Temple with a single finger. I heard from Imojianli that you even, however, at this point, Shueping's expression suddenly changed. If Xiaohua's fight with the monks of the small gold temple was considered a game of the mortal world, then Xiaohua's battle with Liao Jiang. What kind of game was that? No matter how much Xiaohua played around, he couldn't treat the lives of the townspeople of Longevity Town as child's play. He even gave the credit of defeating the sea race to the Buddhist sect Ci Hang. This didn't make sense at all. Xiaohua pondered for a moment. He knew what Shueping was thinking and smiled. This old man was injured that day, and my cultivation was greatly reduced. Otherwise, how could I have allowed the sea race to run rampant in Liaojiang? Even you. Didn't you give this old man a shock too? Shueping came to a realization and hurriedly smiled. Senior really didn't show his true colors that day. This junior really couldn't tell. Shueping did not dare to ask any more questions. He continued, Senior, there is something you don't know. Ever since Buddhist sect's master Ci Hang blocked the Sea tribe at Liao River and used a Buddhist sect's Buddhist artifact to collect the river water that was supposed to flood Longevity Town, he obtained the psyche power of tens of thousands of townspeople in Longevity Town. He almost attained the Bodhisattva Buddha fruit in Longevity Town. The townspeople of Longevity Town have regarded Master Ci Hang as their savior. Not only did they worship Longevity Town's memorial tablet at home every day, they also went to Shaojian Temple to offer incense and recite the virtues of Guanyin Bodhisattva. Previously, in Long Life Town, Long Life Academy was still the leader. That small gold temple really wasn't much, only a bit better than the River and Tide Temple when Senior first arrived in Long Life Town. However, with the worship of tens of thousands of villagers, small gold temple's incense offerings flourished 100 times. Oh, The Jiangqiao temple where you stayed that day is no longer there. It's said that they're going to build a Guanyin monastery. Not only are the townspeople of Longevity Town so crazy, the entire country of Shi and the other countries in Yu province, be it the devout townspeople or the monks of various temples, all of them are flocking to Longevity Town as if they're on a pilgrimage. They're heading to Shao Jian Temple and Guanyin Monastery to worship Guanyin Bodhisattva. Senior, you must have seen clearly that day that C.I. Hang was only one step away from attaining the Bodhisattva Buddha fruit. However, in reality, he didn't attain the Bodhisattva Buddha fruit. Shui Ping continued, however, according to the mouths of those foolish townspeople, C.I. Hang actually attained the Bodhisattva Buddha fruit. They even want to forge a 10-foot golden body for Guanyin Bodhisattva on Jiangqiao Ridge. Furthermore, I've heard that many people feel that Jiangqiao Ridge is too small to accommodate Guanyin Bodhisattva's golden body. They're prepared to either completely demolish Jiangqiao Ridge and build it on the flat ground or pile up soil to build a mountain around Jiangqiao Ridge, expanding the area of Jiangqiao Ridge tenfold. Hiss! Xiaohua gasped and asked curiously, although the north of Jiangqiao Ridge is barren, there are farmlands and farmhouses in the east and west. How are they going to demolish them or pile up soil to build a mountain? Shui Ping smiled bitterly. Senior, you might not know this, but the townspeople near Jiangqiao Ridge know that it's for Guanyin Bodhisattva's golden body. They've long donated the farmlands and left with their families. Sigh. Xiaohua sighed. Longevity Town is now a monk town filled with bald people. A tile fell and injured 10 people. 6 of them were monks who came to Longevity Town, while the other 4 were devotees who came to offer incense. Shui Ping continued, Longevity Town belongs to Nanpu County. When the county governor found out about this, he had a huge headache and hurriedly reported it to the king. I don't know about the king's decree, but ever since the king's decree, the entire Nanpu County has been shrouded in a strange atmosphere. On the surface, Nanpu County seems to be very peaceful, and the government and people are normal. However, there's an undercurrent surging within. Not only have some Confucian cultivators secretly come, but many Taoist cultivators have also revealed themselves. As the first person to render meritorious service in Longevity Town, I've received many rewards. There's even a rumor that the king intends to give me the position of general to guard Longevity Town. The more I think about it, the more scared I feel. These Confucian cultivators must have a huge conflict with the Buddhist sect in Longevity Town. They can play whatever they want, but why are they involving us Taoist cultivators? As a Taoist disciple and expose myself, I'll definitely be the first to be sent out if there's any strange movement. If I don't go by then, I'll be disobeying the king's decree. Not to mention the king. Even the county governor can take my head. However, if I go, will the Buddhist sect's Dharma protector let me live in peace? I'm sure that the demon-subduing pestle is already waiting to land on my head, right? Thus, I might as well go all out and submit a letter to the county governor to resign, saying that I've reached a critical point in my cultivation of a secret technique that involves my life. The prefectural governor did not agree at first, but this junior submitted 3 dictionaries in a row. In the end, the prefectural governor remembered this junior's hard work and finally agreed. This junior received the confirmation and left Nanpu County on the same day. Not bad. You're able to see clearly when to advance and when to retreat. Xiaohua nodded. After all, the situation in Longevity Town was really strange. Shui Ping was able to see so far despite being in the middle of it, which surprised Xiaohua. Then where are you now? I'm currently serving as a county governor in Putian County in Liang Province's Shanliang country. Shui Ping didn't dare to hide anything and answered honestly. Xiaohua smiled and clapped. Not bad, not bad. You used to be the left general. Now that you're a county governor, you've improved. Speaking up to this point, Xiaohua was suddenly stunned as though he thought of something. He exclaimed, "Oh, that's not right. Shui Ping, this Shanliang country seems to be established by the Buddhist sect. You're not serving in the country established by the Taoist sect. Why did you go from a Confucian country to a Buddhist sect country?" Shui Ping blinked his eyes. He was very surprised that Xiaohua knew that the Shanliang country was established by the Buddhist sect. However, he didn't dare to ask and could only answer, "Senior, you might not know." My cultivation in Tao isn't profound, but I have some unique points in the art of war and spear arts. If I went to the country established by the Taoist sect, there might not be a position that I'm satisfied with. Only a country established by the Buddhist sect or a country established by the Confucian sect can satisfy me. Among them, the descendants of the Confucian school of the military are also skilled in the art of war. I found a few Confucian countries, but I wasn't satisfied. When I arrived at the Shanliang country, although I'm not too fond of the Buddhist sect, the people in the Shanliang country are simple and honest, and the Buddhist aura is exuberant. The country's ruler is also a kind-hearted person. Compared to the few Confucian countries nearby, it's much better. Therefore, I attempted to serve the Putian County governor. Coincidentally, the Putian County governor was lacking someone like me who knew how to lead troops and set up formations. After trying, he was very satisfied and immediately petitioned the king to request for the position of Left General for me. What surprised me even more was that the king's decree actually allowed me to become the county governor's army. Not only will I control the Putian County's military and political power, but I'll also assist the county governor in handling government affairs. He doesn't care about my identity as a Taoist sect cultivator at all. The king's breadth of mind, TSK. I'm truly impressed. -12. Chapter 3582. Oh, the monarch of the Chanyang kingdom is so wise? Xiao Hua was a little confused. It seemed that in Xiao Jin's words, the monarch of the Chaoyang country was a cruel person, an ungrateful person, extremely unbearable. Why was it so different from Xue Ping's description? This monarch. What is his name? If we're talking about the monarch's name, it has something to do with Senior Xiao, Xue Ping said with a smile. My monarch's surname is Xiao and his name is Jun. He's a loyal monarch. Xiao Jun? Xiao Hua frowned. Wasn't this the shameless person Xiao Jian mentioned who stole his throne? Actually, I came to Yaodai Mountain because I took the initiative to request the monarch to send people to recruit some Dao cultivators. Xue Ping continued, after all, although my Chanyang kingdom has a strong population, it might not be rich. I feel that we urgently need some people with lofty ideals to help our monarch govern the country and prevent other countries from harboring ill intentions towards my Chanyang kingdom. Don't tell me you were bribed by a mere county governor joining the army? Xiao Hua said with a smile. Don't forget that you're a Dao cultivator. You're not a Buddhist kingdom's bodhisattva. Senior, you're wrong. When Xue Ping heard that, he answered righteously, of course I won't abandon my principles just because a prefectural governor has joined the army. I still don't approve of the Buddhist sect, but that doesn't mean I don't approve of a Buddhist kingdom or the monarch of a Buddhist kingdom. My monarch seems to know about the Yaodai meeting, but he didn't think about it before. When he saw this junior's memorial, he immediately made a decision. Not only did he approve this junior's memorial, he even personally brought some aides to Yaodai Mountain. Xiao Hua smiled. So Xiao Jun is also at Yaodai Mountain. That's right. Xue Ping nodded. When Senior flew over, I was chatting with my monarch's aides and was delayed. When I saw Senior's face, I didn't dare to approach. Later, when I saw a nascent soul Senior, I had to be courteous to Senior. Only then did I muster the courage to come over. If Senior is willing, I'll invite my monarch to pay you a visit. Xiao Hua's heart stirred as he asked, You told the county governor of Butian Commandery about Longevity Town, right? That's right. I have nothing to hide. Xue Ping nodded. Then, have you told your monarch about this old man's visit today? Junior wouldn't dare. Longevity Town's matters are Junior's own. Junior naturally dares to speak. But Senior's matter. I dare not speak rashly without Senior's approval, Xue Ping immediately said in a panic. Xiao Hua nodded. That's good. You don't need to tell others about this old man's matters. If this old man is interested, he can come and find you. Yes, this junior understands. Xue Ping hastily stood up, knowing that Xiao Hua was about to send him off. However, when he stood up, he still didn't forget to say, Senior, if you have the time, this junior would like to invite His Majesty to meet you. Although this junior hasn't met His Majesty much, I have a good relationship with His Majesty's aides. All the advisors know the monarch very well. There, reputation towards the monarch is extremely good. Xiaohua frowned and said with a smile that was not a smile, Xueping, are you just here to be the Buddhist sect's lobbyist? Oh, please forgive me, senior. Xueping hastily shut his mouth and said with a smile, this junior is used to speaking these days, so I just said it in passing. This is my message talisman. If senior returns from the Yaodai gathering with a full load, this junior will come and congratulate senior. With that said, Xueping carefully took out a message talisman and handed it to Xiaohua, looking at him pitifully. It seemed that he was still worried when Xiaohua said that he would look for him when he had the time. Xiaohua reached out to take it without any displeasure on his face. Only then did Xueping feel relieved. He looked around and said, Senior is already a nascent soul cultivator. Why don't you have a boy to serve you? If Senior needs one, can this junior send a few over? There's no need for that. Xiaohua was somewhat speechless. He waved his hand and said, I'm just here to take a stroll around Yaodai Mountain. Why would I need a boy to serve me? Those who came with me earlier were also people I met along the way. They can't be considered as disciples. Senior is really amiable and approachable. Xueping sighed. If this junior cultivates to the nascent soul realm, I'll definitely have someone to rely on like perfected Yuan Qing. This is something that a nascent soul senior should enjoy. It won't be too late to talk about it after you cultivate to the nascent soul realm. Xiaohua said with a smile, and then walked to see him off. How could Xueping dare to let Xiaohua see him off? He hurriedly bowed and said, Senior, please wait. This junior doesn't dare to trouble you. Senior Xiao, let this junior see this fellow Taoist off. With that said, Changyu quickly walked out of the quiet room and said eagerly, I'm Changyu. Fellow Taoist, this way please. Xiaohua nodded and stopped in his tracks. Xueping bowed again and smiled at Changyu before following him out of the palace. Looking at Xueping's back, Xiaohua frowned slightly. He was somewhat surprised by Xueping's visit, but he was even more puzzled by Xiaojun's situation. Xiaohua returned to the jade table and sat down. Not long after, Changyu turned around and Xiaohua said loudly, All of you, come out and follow me to this palace. Don't cultivate in seclusion. Otherwise, wouldn't it be the same as a cave? With that said, he waved his hand and took out some spirit fruits and spirit wine, placing them on 3 jade tables. Changyu blinked and bowed. Thank you, Senior Xiao. Today, I've benefited from your presence. Hearing Xiaohua's summons, Wu Tianxin and Zhu Chengli hurriedly came out as well. They were happy to see the spirit fruits and other things. After thanking him, they sat down and ate and drank while chatting in a reserved manner. Xiaohua also casually said a few words before asking, Changyu, do you know of the Chanyang country in Liang province? Senior, Liang province is very far from Qing province. This junior has never heard of it. Changyu was about to drink when he hurriedly put down the wine cup and answered respectfully. Previously, Xiaohua did not hide his conversation with Xueping from the 3 of them. Therefore, Xiaohua said again, This Xueping is someone I knew in the past. I heard from him that he's currently serving as a county governor in the Chanyang country, which was founded by a Buddhist sect. I don't understand. Is the monarch of this Chanyang country really using our Taoist cultivators? Or does he really have the intention to develop his country and seek benefits for his citizens? No matter what, he's using our Taoist cultivators to work for his Buddhist sect. Wu Tianxin stood up without hesitation and said, There aren't many good people in the Buddhist sect. On the surface, they're benevolent, abstain from meat and pray to Buddha. They don't get close to women, but in reality, how many men can tolerate their 10 precepts? This disciple has cultivated for so many years, but I can only abstain from 9 of the 10 precepts. Xiaohua knew Wu Tianxin's personality and did not find it strange. He smiled and said, Which precepts are so powerful? Even great cultivator Wu can't abide by them. Lust precepts. Lust is emptiness. Emptiness is lust. It's all nonsense. Wu Tianxin smiled and said, This lust precepts are men's lust tribulation. I don't think any man can avoid it. Old Wu, you've drunk too much. Zhu Chengli stole a glance at Xiaohua and hurriedly chided, Don't violate your precepts in front of Senior. Wu Tianxin shuddered and shrank his neck. He hurriedly sat down and took a spirit fruit to chew. Actually, It might not be as serious as fellow Taoist Wu said. Chang Yu smiled and said, I've seen some Buddhist sect monks who say one thing and mean another. Similarly, I've seen even more Buddhist sect experts who are sincere towards Buddhism and treat others with sincerity. With fellow Taoist Xue Ping's cultivation, if not for the fact that the single Yang kingdom really attracted him, he might not have stayed behind, and even more so, he wouldn't have taken the initiative to come to Yaodai Mountain. It's certain that the single Yang kingdom's monarch is using Taoist cultivators, but we can't rule out the fact that this monarch is indeed ambitious. At this point, Chang Yu looked at Xiao Hua again and said, if Senior is interested, you'll know when you meet him. Otherwise, Senior can ride a Pegasus to the single Yang kingdom to take a look. If not, Junior and the others can also do it for you. Haha, there's no need for that. Xiao Hua waved his hand. I'm just curious. If I have time, I'll go take a look myself. Zhu Chengli seemed to want to say something, but before he could speak, Xiao Hua raised his head and looked outside the palace. He said, Chang Yu, go take a look. There seems to be someone outside again. Yes, Senior. Chang Yu was very happy. He hurriedly got up and walked quickly to the palace door. Zhu Chengli and Wu Tianxin were slightly stunned. After all, their cultivation levels were relatively low. If there was anything, they should be called. Zhu Chengli even had a look of regret on his face. Not long after, Chang Yu brought a boy with red lips and white teeth in a clean Taoist robe in. He said respectfully, Senior Hong Songzi sent an invitation card to invite you to a banquet. Junior Qing Mu greets perfected Xiao. The boy walks in front of Xiao Hua and respectfully raises his hands. In his hands is a diamond-shaped crystal object. Inside it is flashing a green and red brilliance. It looks very extraordinary. The boy says, Junior is under the order of my family's Taoist to invite Taoists to Taoist Huada's banquet. Xiao Hua slightly nodded and reached out to take the crystal object. He slightly used his Zhen Yuan and saw the crystal overflowing with brilliance. The green and red brilliance respectively gathered in two parts of the crystal. Soon after, the brilliance rushed out of the crystal and swam in front of Xiao Hua's eyes like a shuttle used to weave cloth. A moment later, a gorgeous invitation card appeared. The characters seemed to come alive and made a sound. It was Hong Songzi's voice. Perfected Xiao, I originally planned to invite fellow Taoists to my Immortal's Cave for a chat a few days ago. However, in these few days, fellow Taoists from various provinces have come to Yaodai Mountain. This is really beyond my expectations. Today, I just received Perfected Huada's invitation. I thought that I might as well go together. If fellow Taoist has the time, you can ask Qing Mu to bring fellow Taoist here. I will wait in my Immortal's Cave. The voice drifted in the palace. The green and red brilliance gradually disappeared. The crystal object also turned into powder. Xiao Hua looked at Qing Mu, standing respectfully. He turned his head and sent a sound transmission to Chang Yu. Who is this Perfected Huada? -12. Chapter 3583. Chang Yu's face revealed astonishment, and he hastily replied, Senior, this Huada Taoist is the state teacher of Ji Province's Lihua Nation. It's said that he's already cultivated to the late stage of nascent soul, and his strength has reached the lower 5th level. This Lihua Nation was originally founded by Huada Taoist, and its national strength is very strong. It already has a history of several thousand years in Ji Province, so Huada Taoist's name is also very well known. Junior also heard that Huada Taoist has a very deep friendship with the Confucian school of Mo. In Qing Mu, Xiao Hua heard and said, Does Huada Taoist only invite nascent soul cultivators to his banquet? Senior, please no. Qing Mu respectfully replied, Huada Taoist's invitation didn't say so, but there are at least several hundred Taoist cultivators coming to Yaodai Mountain. If not thousands, Huada Taoist can't invite them all. Only nascent soul seniors can go. However, Qing Mu raised his eyes to look at Chang Yu's group of 3 and said with slight hesitation, Senior, if you want to bring your sect's disciples, it should be possible. Oh, okay. Xiao Hua nodded and waved his hand. You lead the way. Chang Yu, you and the others follow me to the banquet. Yes, Senior Xiao, please. Qing Mu bowed and took a few steps forward to lead the way. Chang Yu and the others were overjoyed. They definitely didn't expect Xiao Hua to bring them to the banquet. Chang Yu and the others understood that being able to meet a nascent soul cultivator was a fated chance. Just like the three of them, there was a huge difference between before and after meeting Xiao Hua. A nascent soul cultivator could casually give them some pointers and some rewards, allowing them to take a few more steps on the arduous path of cultivation. Chang Yu looked further ahead than Wu Tianxin and Zhu Qingli, so he didn't urgently look for Xiao Hua and instead waited for an opportunity. Wasn't Xiao Hua's words a kind of repayment? Senior, please. Chang Yu didn't dare to overstep and bowed to invite Xiao Hua to go first. And Xiao Hua knew that at this time, he wouldn't be as casual as he was before arriving at Yaodai Mountain. He nodded slightly and walked forward. Hong Songzi's palace was quite far from Xiao Hua's. Greenwood Child walked out of the palace gate and gave Xiao Hua a slight smile. Clouds appeared under his feet, and he flew towards the other side of Yaodai Mountain. Xiao Hua didn't use the magic cloud technique. Instead, he used a simple Taoist flying technique to follow behind Qingmu. Now, the sky was gradually darkening. Many palaces and pavilions were abnormally bright in the dark. Xiao Hua glanced around and couldn't help but be shocked. It was really as Qingmu said. Many palaces were already lit up, and even more pavilions were resplendent outside the palaces. The Dao cultivators of the hidden immortal continent were far more numerous than what Xiao Hua had expected. As Xiao Hua flew through the air, many divine senses swept over. However, Xiao Hua had just shown his outstanding strength, and his reputation wasn't that great. The strength he displayed seemed to be just so. Therefore, the divine senses swept over and then retracted. They didn't take Xiao Hua seriously. Another moment later, a divine sense swept over. Once it touched Xiao Hua, it immediately withdrew. Then, 3 rainbow-colored lights streaked across the sky from afar. Unexpectedly, it was Hong Songzi, Taoist Yuan Qing, and another fat nascent soul cultivator who came to welcome them. From afar, Hong Songzi smiled and said, "Taoist Master Xiao, I'm really sorry to disturb your quiet cultivation." Xiao Hua urged his figure and instantly passed by Qingmu. He cupped his hands and said, "Fellow Taoist, I know that fellow Taoist has been busy these past few days. That's why I didn't dare to disturb you. Now that fellow Taoist has invited me, I couldn't ask for more." Xiao Hua greets fellow Taoists. Come, hi Hongzi. This is Taoist Master Xiao Hua of the Black Cloud Ridge that I mentioned to you before. Hong Songzi smiled and returned the greeting. He pulled the fat cultivator beside him and said. Unexpectedly, the fat cultivator slightly frowned. He looked at Xiao Hua from head to toe. He wasn't as affectionate as Hong Songzi thought. Instead, he casually raised his hand and said, Hi Hongzi. Greetings fellow Taoist Xiao. Hee. Taoist Yuan Qing laughed and said, Hi Hongzi, fellow Taoist Xiao is a Taoist who doesn't reveal his true strength. Don't look at him, just because he only revealed the strength of a third-grade origin energy. You have to look carefully. Don't be fooled by his false appearance. That day, this old man didn't pay attention to it. If it wasn't for fellow Taoist Hong Songzi's attentiveness, we would have lost a great help in the future. Xiao Hua naturally already sensed that Hai Hongzi was checking his cultivation. However, he was used to hiding his strength. Now that he heard Taoist Yuan Qing mention it, although he didn't say that he should reveal it, if he continued to hide it, it would be hypocritical. Therefore, Xiao Hua lightly patted the top of his head. He slightly released the pressure of a middle nascent soul stage cultivator. Qingmu, Chang Yu and the others at the side immediately felt that it was difficult to breathe. A kind of mountain-like pressure directly broke into their hearts. Fellow Taoist Xiao has actually entered the middle of the 4th-grade origin energy? Hai Hongzi was shocked. He looked at Xiao Hua up and down in disbelief. He said in surprise, fellow Taoist with such strength. How come this old man doesn't know anything about it? This Xiao has always been in secluded meditation. I didn't want to attract the attention of a Confucian cultivator. Xiao Hua had already thought of an excuse. Moreover, previously I had a big battle with a Confucian cultivator. My cultivation has only just recovered. It would be strange if fellow Taoist Hai Hongzi knew about it. So that's how it is. I understand. Hai Hongzi laughed. He looked at Taoist Yuan Qing and said, It seems that fellow Taoist Xiao and fellow Taoist Yuanqing are both thinking about taking action. Don't mention this old man. Taoist Yuanqing hurriedly waved his hand. This old man is not interested in the Imperial Preceptor's lot. However, when he said that, Taoist Yuanqing's face became somewhat unnatural. He looked at Hong Songzi, but Hong Songzi said with a smile, "It's nothing." Since fellow Taoist Xiao came to participate in the Jade Pavilion gathering, whether it's for the Imperial Preceptor's lot or for other reasons, he's still a member of our Tao sect. Moreover, when we saw fellow Taoist Xiao, we had a feeling that he was an old friend. This is also fate. Since we're going to ask for help, we naturally have to ask for a virtuous cultivator like fellow Taoist Xiao. Hearing this, how could Xiao Hua not know? He hurriedly waved his hand and said, "This Xiao doesn't dare to call himself a virtuous cultivator. However, this Xiao can tell you all that this Xiao's purpose is the Imperial Preceptor's lot. This Xiao isn't interested in any other treasures." Hee hee. Hai Hongzi heard this and couldn't help but laugh. "Fellow Taoist Xiao, you don't have to say it so early. The Imperial Preceptor's lot isn't that rare. There's only one chance every 10 years. It's only a matter of time before nascent soul cultivators like you and me get the Imperial Preceptor's lot. However, this treasure isn't available every time." "What do you mean, fellow Taoist Hai Hongzi?" Xiao Hua was somewhat puzzled. However, Hong Songzi looked at the 3 golden core cultivators behind Xiao Hua and said, "We still don't know if this matter is true or not. We're just discussing it. We'll have an answer at Taoist Huada's banquet. It won't be too late for me to tell you then." "Fellow Taoist Xiao, these 3, are they your disciples?" "Oh, they're not this old man's disciples," Xiao Hua said with a smile. "We met them on the road. Since it's fate, we'll bring them along. If fellow Taoist feels it's inconvenient, this old man will let them return." "That won't be necessary. I also want to bring a few disciples. There's no harm in bringing them along." Hong Songzi waved his hand and transmitted a few words to the people below. From the palace below him, a dozen golden core cultivators flew out. When these cultivators arrived in front of Xiao Hua, they all bowed and greeted him, saying that they had seen Senior Xiao. Xiao Hua waved his hand in return. Chang Yu and the others also hurried over to greet him. The 2 groups of cultivators cooperated and flew towards the Yaotai Mountains cave under Hong Songzi's lead. Seeing that Hong Songzi had already passed the area where the palace was located and was about to enter the cave, Xiao Hua was puzzled. He thought to himself, could it be that this so-called Taoist Huada is in the cave's quiet room? However, when he followed Hong Songzi into the cave, they kept flying inside and passed by a lot of quiet rooms. At the same time, more than a dozen nascent soul cultivators flew out of the quiet rooms and nodded slightly to Xiao Hua and the others before flying in the same direction. Xiao Hua knew that his thoughts weren't wrong. However, when he flew into the depths of the cave, he saw a huge palace door open. In front of the palace door stood a lot of boys welcoming guests. He knew that he still underestimated this Taoist Huada. He actually had an immortal's cave in the Yaotai Mountain that was different from the others. Xiao Hua and the others landed in front of the palace door. Naturally, a boy hurriedly came forward and bowed to greet them. After asking for their names, he immediately led them into the palace. The palace was huge, similar to the immortal's cave of an ordinary nascent soul cultivator. Now, thick candles were hung all over the palace, brightening the entire palace. The palace's layout could be considered exquisite. Various kinds of curtains were hung between the walls and the pillars. The fist-sized pearls on them shone brightly under the candles. However, even Xiao Hua, a cultivator who didn't pay attention to luxury, felt that although this palace was much more luxurious than the palaces outside, it still didn't match Taoist Huada's identity as a nascent soul cultivator. There were a lot of jade tables placed in the palace. Although they seemed somewhat disorderly, they were very orderly. No matter which jade table the cultivator sat on, they would feel that they were very close to the jade table at the head. There wasn't any feeling of favoritism. At this moment, there were a lot of cultivators sitting inside the palace. Some were tall, some were short, some were fat, some were thin, some had white hair, some were drooping, and so on. When these cultivators saw Hong Songzi and the others come in, they naturally swept out their divine senses. However, when they saw their faces and cultivations, they withdrew them. Xiaohua now looked like a middle nascent soul cultivator. He wasn't particularly conspicuous among this group of nascent soul cultivators. When Xiaohua entered the main hall, he naturally looked towards the head of the palace. He saw that behind the jade table, there was a boy who wasn't more than 5 feet tall sitting upright. This boy's face was slightly red, and there was a pitch-black flame pattern flickering between his eyebrows. It somewhat resonated with the flickering golden light of the Taoist robe on his body. Moreover, the golden light on the Taoist robe was like a scorching flame, forming a faint layer of distortion around the boy's body. Looking at it with the naked eye, the boy seemed to be in another void. Good. Xiaohua secretly stuck out his tongue. This is probably Taoist Huada. To be able to cultivate true fire to such a degree, he's really amazing. -12.